Yeah, I'm not saying anything. Well, the link is up. I wasn't sure if I was even going to do this. I have other things to do. Yeah, no. Well, I might as well answer this. So I made this video in response to Quintica. And so he's understands my description of the voice. That's nice, because that's probably the least easy to understand. I mean, you don't have to, but thank you. Says he should go more clarifying context about feminism being sexist. If your belief is that society, in part or as a whole expanded concept in abstract, favors men over women, then feminism maintains its value as a movement to grant, not sure if grant is the proper term, equal rights to women as an equal to men's rights. Yeah, well, I mean, I think the whole system is corrupt. I think that everybody's screwed over by it. However, if you believe that men and women have equal rights, then feminism, as opposed to humanitarianism and egalitarianism, is an exclusionary term that is sexist towards men. Yeah. But no, because how could they ever be totally equal? Like, if I'm in a society that has medical research and I'm a woman, then, breast cancer research affects my gender more. If I'm a man, it's prostate cancer or something. So there is no possibility of equal rights. To make things fair is not to make them the same in every respect, equal. The ideology relies the notion that men are favored in society. No, see, that's the thing. I've worked with a lot of feminists that think there's problems in labor. There's injustices all over. Remember, social justice in general. And it's not as trivial a notion as men are favored. Men are slaves too. Men are fodder for war. As that favored is the wrong word. You're oversimplifying it. Yes, some feminists might also look at it that way. There might be a feminist out there like, society's great. It's just that women should have more power in the society that we have. But the general social justice idea is that we do not have the society that we want, period. We're not looking for one of the other positions in the prison. We're not trying to be the warden. The whole system is screwed up. I don't even want to be the warden. It's still a screwed up system. I don't want to live in. I don't want to be in the top of a, trash heap. Well, I don't know if I want to read this all out loud. I'll just read it to myself. Oh, indie developers. Anyway, just reading some messages. Some guy defending Jefferson. Like, I'm a Jeffersonian. Like, oh, so you want us to have just slave plantations coast to coast. That's your view of the country. So one thing I was going to describe is, again, because it's a linchpin of my position, and I notice that I try to make really clear the linchpins of my thinking on these subjects, and people just don't seem to absorb it. But all you can do is keep trying. So one of the things is that the word patriarchy seems to have confused a lot of the anti-feminists. Maybe it confuses feminists and whatnot. It's really just a take on traditionalism with a focus on the gender imbalance in traditionalism, right? So I'm not really open to you people saying, oh, just a hallucination, just a made-up concept. No, there is a traditionalism. There's a lot of gender biases, whether you could support or unsupport in traditionalism. And this is what's being identified with the concept of patriarchy. Nothing about the patriarchy says like every man outranks every woman, right? The lady of the manor, the princess, those are over the innkeep and the groundskeeper. Okay. If they were to argue with each other as witnesses to something, the woman's word would likely be accepted, because there's an elitism and a classism that overrides any gender features in this traditionalism, because it's such an expansive thing with many layers of roles, and everybody's supposed to have a place, get a role, ideally by birth, and fulfill it. And so that is a real thing. And we that are working for social fairness and social justice see that it's not an automatic. It's not an automatic thing that you have like the world's fine because it was natural the way we got here. We're burdened by traditions that allowed and encouraged slavery and war and basically exploitation, and we still do. We still have that system. So we're making progress against it, and you would like to stop us by helping us be more effective in the way you want us to be effective, which is to just admit things are fine the way they are, in the sense that, we have the best of all possible worlds. It can't be better. This is the one we have. And I don't believe that, Candide. So, I'm not really feeling too great today. I have work to do. Should have already been doing. Then the last couple of months, I wake up upset every day about June, and my other daughter, how she might be doing or is doing. She's out in California, and I haven't really been able to talk to her with voice, so she sent me some text. She's like, sorry, my phone and stuff, but so I miss her, and I live a little bit of a nightmare about that. My life is never going to be, if it was ever normal in the first place, is a question, but it's certainly never going to be normal again. But as I hint there, I don't think it was ever particularly normal to begin with. So I don't really care about the normality of it, but it's weird, it's hard. So another one of these concepts is a microaggression stuff. Now, definitely, the funny thing about microaggressions is yes, we do know that such things exist. There's passive aggressive, and and then there's passive bigotries, like, I have some people in my family that don't think that they're racist, but if they meet a black family that's well-spoken, hey, he went to college, like it's such a surprising thing, and like they're liberal for being able to recognize it, but not having noticed until 2005. But So those kinds of things, they're small, so micro, and they are aggressive or passive aggressive, or they convey things that the person acting that way might not realize they're conveying. So it's a good thing to know. Now, the irony is that passive aggressive people can use the concept of microaggression to be passive aggressive and to try to control other people in a in a micromanaging way. No, I don't support that. But I think that the best way to make sure that we don't have that kind of abuse of these concepts is to accept what the concepts really do denote, that they're phenomena that the concepts are about. And then we can look at the phenomena, analyze how these behaviors interact, and decide what to do. It's not a thing I want to see turned into regulation. I don't want to see a concept of microaggressions becoming the rules at school. On the other hand, if a company, big companies, want to train their employees in this, all they're really doing is training. It's communications training, how people communicate. And sometimes it's not words, sometimes it's dismissiveness or even over exuberance or whatever. And I don't think, I personally don't feel afraid of people trying to make these arguments, because I can make the counter argument that no, it works this other way, or no, really, here's the microaggression. I do think it's a dangerous thing, though. I don't think I can support a lot of action based on microaggressions. What I support is people studying them and then us discussing them. And I think a certain amount of training done in that spirit is good. What was the other thing? Oh, I forget. So anyway, I do have a lot of work to do, and I'm also a little bit just a bad mood. But I think what I'll do is I'll take a little on-air, dead-air break. And if anybody comes back, we can have a conversation. If not, then this is the spiel for this week. So what am I trying to do with these controls is put this, then this, this. I am the one viewer.
Mm. I hear feedback. I hear feedback. Probably Piro, as always. Fucking shitty at technology for a professional.
Oh, hello. Oh, hey, Garrett. Oh, no. Draft Science and Athena. Okay, so you must be Athena. You don't look like Gary. That other window must be Gary.
Might be. I don't know. Might be a vitamin bottle. I'll decide. All right, I'll be me for a while. Yeah, so, I don't know if I
I
want.
subbed to this guy of yours, that photographer. Crazy dude.
Yeah, he is crazy. Unfortunately, yeah, I got no reply from him, so that was sort of a bummer. I can't get a reply from anybody, so it's really kind of irritating. Nobody seems to want to discuss physics.
Well, I don't know what to say about that. I like to discuss it, but, everybody that wants to discuss it either thinks they already know or they hate my favorite physicist, and it just makes it difficult. It was lovely to see you actually defending Feynman. That helped me get interested in him. I'm still trying to figure out what his thing is. I guess he's got some sort of magnetic theory, and I haven't gone back and watched most of his videos. Of course, are photo stuff. So I guess I need to see. I'm slowly going back through his science videos to figure out what it is he thinks is happening. I don't know if you said you did that, right? You've watched his older. I've seen like 2 of them now. He came out with another one on Newton just recently.
Oh, I didn't see that yet. Yeah, I didn't sub to him. I didn't have guts for that. But I just check his channel now and then. Yeah, no, I mean it's kind of like the there's a whole bunch of these people have all this electric, magnetism kind of theory that's the game, that's the universe. And I just find it sort of ironic because, the one they should be unifying under is gravity. Because when you think about gravity just a little bit, you start to realize that gravity is an all the way down force. It's you sort of already know that because big objects combine as if they were single objects. They always have a center of gravity. I mean, if I put 100 people together, they have a center of gravity. They're essentially, from a gravitational perspective, one thing. And that's how big space works, and it's just so obvious that that's exactly how little space works. It goes all the way right down, and that it's just
Yeah.
a nuance of gravity that's creating magnetism and electricity. These are just forces that are just nuances of this fundamental gravitational force. So, I mean, we know light's polarized, right? Doesn't this seem reasonable to you? If we say light's polarized, why wouldn't we have gravity polarized? So if
Yep.
both forces move at the same speed, we just think of gravity as being polarized, and you can all of a sudden imagine all kinds of situations where there would be strong and weak gravity. And so the strong and weak nuclear forces are basically strong and weak gravity.
Hmm.
Wow, he's actually saying some really cool stuff right now. I like that.
Well, I'm
So
just saying,
I like the pilot theory personally, where you could say if you want to insert gravity into the equation, and if you're talking about it being both poles, then you're also including electricity and magnetism. Then that would make a lot of sense. But there's still, of course, there's always the times that the things don't go the way that they think it's going to go. But
well, whatever that is, that's just cliche crap. I'm just saying this always argument I'm just really sick of. I'm sick of this people just dragging crap like that up, like Rome's always going to burn, and this is just those are bullshit cliches. Don't have any meaning whatsoever, and so it doesn't mean anything. Okay, once you have the right answer, you have the right answer. The world is not flat, and it's never going to be flat. Okay, so yeah, they had it wrong once, and it's now not wrong anymore. And again, you're never going back to a flat world.
yeah,
well, the thing about polarization is it's actually really simple. Like if you have an antenna, the antenna is up and down. When you're sending out radio waves, you're shaking electrons up and down. That shake causes the photon one way or another by any of our theories. And it's aligned, the polarization of that photon is aligned with the antenna, right? Because you're shaking it up and down. So, and so the same thing would happen in gravity if you believe that there must be a graviton, which most of the scientists do, but they haven't, been able to capture it or whatever. Then it would also have the same kind of polarization. It would have to, any three-dimensional wave will have a polarization based on how you jiggle it in the first place.
Right, and that's sort of what I think Feynman was getting at with his virtual photon, because he was basically just coming up with this mechanism. He knew there was a force, and he was just making up a force carrier. So he just invented a force carrier that moved the same speed as light, which magnetism and electricity have the capacity to do at their absolutes. So it's basically, you can see the similarity in the force, and to me it all comes down to just understanding force as being a straight line mechanism. I mean, all these things we call invisible forces all behave as straight line vector forces. They don't have any ability to go around corners. Okay, that's what waves do. Okay, so these forces are not waves. They can manifest as waves in matter, but they can't manifest as waves in the sense the force themselves that's causing the wave it's a straight line vector force. It's very geometric.
Mm-hmm.
I completely forgot what I was going to say. Dang it.
But the point, I guess, the other point I wanted to get to was I mean, I wish there's just so little opportunity to have any kind of discussion. Because you go to these forum pages and they're all, it's like I'm having a little bit of this discussion of circumcision, in the last few of my Mendham videos, because the commenters keep bringing it up. But it's just, they sit there and link to these pages, and they're also one-sided. It's almost like the diet program pages. Like they think these are like science pages, and they look just like like I lost 50 pounds, jumping up and down and singing musical songs. And it's just so funny because they'll have the exaggerated pictures of the penises. They'll have all this, and it's like, this is just propaganda. You're saying how everybody's just so they call it genital mutilation. I mean, they can't even get serious a little bit about the subject.
Well, I think that's because a lot of times when people punch things into their computer, they're going to receive whatever answer they want because their algorithms are already tailored to not questioning things that they believe.
Well, it's not even that. I'm just saying that there's such a bias built into, these are supposed to be scientists. They're not supposed to be fucking children. And the fact that they can't even accept the argument, they won't even allow the conversation, is just an indication that they have no scientific temperament. I mean, they just refuse to behave like an adult.
It's like debating piercing your ears, though. I mean, really, I'm
just saying there's a difference. Scientists shouldn't be like a bunch of assholes, okay? You can't just say, yes,
totally agree, but
you can't be assholes, okay? They're the end of the conversation. We don't need to drag it out. Thank you.
Well, I'm just curious. So what's the argument, though? I don't remember your position. What are these people's position on it? Both sides are that way, you're saying?
I'm just saying they're radically anti-circumcision, and I'm basically saying, look, I'm circumcised, idiots. I don't have a problem, okay? You can tell me I have a problem, but now I got plenty of nerve endings. I have plenty of gratification and satisfaction, and you can find absolutely no scientific evidence that I have lower performance or any of these issues. So why are you so fucking upset that I'm circumcised?
Well, I think that a lot of people think that there's such a stigma with the other, and you have to know that in the past 10 or 15 years, there was, especially during the Bush years, there was a expensive thing to get circumcised. So there was a lot of parents.
Oh, bullshit! I don't even believe that.
No, this is true.
I really don't know if I can do this room with her in the room.
And then a whole bunch.
The Bush year has nothing to do with the controversy over circumcision. That's been around my whole fucking life.
So.
God, this is so retarded.
Well, the thing to me is I have an answer, and I think it relates to this general social justice issue, which is, of course, it doesn't really matter. It could be a personal choice. There's an issue in whether parents should be able to choose that for a kid.
They have to choose, okay? There's no adult that's going to cut off his foreskin because your brain has already fucking tied to it,
Well,
okay?
but
The
that's
only
an
time
argument
you
to
can
not
do
do it.
circumcision is as a child. If you don't do it as a child, it won't get done.
Yeah, but the whole anti-natalism
If you
issue.
don't force your kid to have violin lessons, he's not going to know how to play the
Yeah,
violin.
but
It's so
but by the
fucking
whole
stupid.
anti-natalist argument,
Oh,
obviously, this
forget
is
it.
the
I mean,
parents.
this is
Can I
just
just
stupid.
finish?
It's a stupid conversation when you can't even get the fundamental premise that there is no
You can't even let
circumcision if
me.
you don't do it as an infant.
Then that's fine. I don't really care if there is or not. I
Yeah,
am
exactly.
saying
You
that
don't care if there is.
I'm
These
saying
people do care. They want to
because
make it. They want to propagandize on the subject, and so that you're again.
because the issue is if you wanted to not circumcise, there used to be a problem with that. The medical establishment would want to demand it. It
Oh, they
was
wouldn't
demanded.
demand it. Okay, yeah,
Yes,
okay.
it
So
was. You know it
everybody says
was.
that about doctors. You know
And
what?
so
I've
it's
never had a doctor that
And then,
forced me to
and then
do
it,
anything.
then it got
Okay, doctors recommend. They don't
the herd
force.
had it,
no,
and
back then
you
they
know,
really
Oh,
it
bullshit.
put
really
pressure.
was.
Bullshit.
And you're
Well, I know
like,
stories of circumcisions happening without even the parents giving consent back in
Bullshit.
the
They
old day.
have to. No way. They could sue the fucking
So
hospital's
that's not the
ass
case
off.
anymore.
Okay, if they don't have a
But
release, they could sue the hospital's
they
so
ass.
as
had
a
this whole
result,
deal about
it's
why it was
became
so bad not to do it that people would do it and they didn't even know
right. So
what
getting the real story out there
Yeah,
that it is
people did what
optional.
their doctor
So,
suggested, okay? And I'm just saying now they've gone the other way around because doctors are feeling all this pressure because people are saying you're just into the money and you're just doing it for this and you're just
it
doing it
should
for the
be
religious.
either or. I don't care
All
either.
this fucking
right.
propaganda, and that's all it is fucking
So
propaganda.
the thing is, though, when you're in a situation where you can't do your free option the way you want, then you create this activist movement, and yeah, it builds up steam and makes its argument because it's fighting people that's saying it's absolutely bad for you. So then they fight that by saying, no, it's absolutely good for you. And it's neither absolutely bad nor good, but that's just the way the history works. That's just the way the argument
I'm
has to
just saying the
unfold.
propaganda shouldn't be winning the argument, and that's my only argument, okay? Lies and propaganda shouldn't be making the
Coming
decision.
from Gary.
And I'm just saying it's irrational. It is a tough choice to make. I'm just saying if I was a father, I would have a choice, and it would be a real choice because I would say to myself, there are advantages to being circumcised, okay? Yes, less bacteria, less viruses, less chance of cancer. It's a fact.
Well,
You have
that's
to be like
debatable.
on top of the
It's
cleanliness.
not debatable. That part isn't debatable. That's the whole fucking thing. That is not debatable. Less bacteria is not debatable.
But it's a thing that's like washing your feet. You learn to wash your feet.
I'm just saying, it doesn't matter whether you wash or not, okay? The fact is they're going to find the yeast on your penis, and they won't find it on a circumcised penis because 50% of the skin isn't folded over itself collecting bacteria. I mean, it's a fact. Why the fuck have this conversation when people can't pay attention to even basic
I really
logic here? It's basic fucking logic.
But
Well, we could take everybody's appendix out as soon as they're born, too. I mean,
Exactly, and wouldn't that? And that's a real question. There's a real question. If you know genetically, there's going to be an 80% chance that your appendix is going to fail during your lifetime. Well, maybe it would be logical to take the damn thing out when the kid's an infant.
it's not the same. I'm not coming from any propaganda or anything. My son is not circumcised because I could not afford to get him circumcised, and I didn't really care about doing it. It was expensive, and I didn't want to do it. So I really don't think that there is any kind of problem. They teach you how to clean it, and then it's
I'm
over.
not going to argue this. It's not about whether there's a
Gary-
fucking problem. There are statistical facts, and there's a real difference in the penis, okay? There's a difference for the lifetime of the owner. The lifetime of the owner, it's a different penis, so there is a choice. Now, you want to say you don't give a shit, that's fine for you to say. I'm glad my parents gave a shit.
I did not have the
You
choice.
just said you didn't give a shit. You just
I wanna
basically
talk
said,
about
even if I had the money, I didn't give a
I
shit.
didn't have a religious
So go
bias.
ahead. Say two things, right? All right. Change your opinion in
I
14
didn't have a religious bias, and it was very expensive. We had to come up with
Again, she just keeps doing it again. You just said you didn't care.
yeah, it's
I
both.
didn't have a religious bias.
But why are you giving us this stupid bullshit about you didn't have the money when you just said you didn't give a shit?
Okay.
It's the same
it was
thing. How's that
waiting
not
the
related?
problem.
Well, I don't know how they're exactly related. You either have an opinion or you don't have an opinion.
I do have an
You're
opinion.
either saying it would have been a really challenging decision for me if I had the money. I would have had a real challenging decision because I really don't know because I never had a fucking penis. You could at least say that.
Well,
I've never had a penis.
You can also not really care one way or the other, but if it was free, you might go ahead and say, well, I guess I better make a
how could a
decision.
male not care one way or the other? I'm just saying my penis is about the most goddamn fucking important thing I own. I can't imagine anything else more fucking important than my goddamn fucking penis. I'm talking about 50% more skin on my goddamn fucking penis, and so I think it's sort of an important subject.
Well, I think an interesting part of this to me is because you say, and this isn't a gotcha, I'm just saying this opens up an issue to me, but it does relate to the anti-natalism thing because the compelling part of the anti-natalist argument is parents shouldn't really be making a decision of whether somebody's existed.
I just argued that, though. That
I
is
know, no, let me finish. So,
if you're going to have a creation, you have a responsibility to act in the best interest of the creation, okay? You're only violating consent. Now you have a responsibility for a life form. They're two separate subjects, Pyro. Consent has already been violated by existence.
Look, what I'm saying, though, is so it raises this issue of, okay, so when you have a kid, obviously you're responsible for him, but you're in an even worse situation where you're making decisions for somebody that does exist already. You know, so it's even more serious than bringing them into existence, or at least as serious.
How it can be more serious. I think the more serious the
equally then.
Is
anyway, I'm just saying it.
Playing God. Playing God means a little. Playing parent is one thing that's really, really difficult, but playing God is even a higher standard.
Right.
You play God and invent people. That's a higher violation any way you look at it.
Part of my argument is I'm granting your side of the thing. I'm seeing that there's this issue of, okay, so then you do have the kid. That argument doesn't go away. Now suddenly, where are we in the? Because I've started to realize, you know, there's some kids. Like I watched this movie about sports parents that really push their kids into sports, and they're terrible. I mean, there were people in the documentary like smacking the kids, crying, you know, and it's like it made me think, well, yeah, a lot of times kids having their parents be the ruler of them is like they're just in a fascist dictatorship. It's just terrible. And so at what point, you know, do we push this to kids' rights?
Well, I know,
you
but
know, when does a kid get
no point in saying kids' rights because that's the same thing as saying the right of idiocracy, right? Because
exactly.
You can't actualize idiocracy. You can't empower stupidity. That's illogical.
You know what? That's probably the strongest anti-natalism argument.
Look, it's a simple argument. Who should drive the bus? The person who knows how to drive a bus, knows what physics is, knows how round wheels work, knows how the vehicle functions, or some ignoramus sitting in the seat who's never done it before and has no fucking clue what life is.
Well, that might be one of your even better. You know, you should add that to the anti-natalism argument that even more than bringing the kid into existence, it's the 18 years of decisions you have to make for him after that are the undoable, unfigure-outable part.
Well, they're all undoable and unfigure. I'm just saying that I'm not going to diminish the godlike bullshit of the decision to actually have a child in a circumstance where you're basically birthing it into a shithole. I mean, that stupidity is such a high.
Well, I hope you understand. I wasn't
there, you've almost basically said, I'm too big an imbecile to be a parent, okay? Once you've made yourself a parent, you've just basically proved you're too fucking stupid to be a parent.
Yeah, no, I wasn't trying to minimize that. I was actually realizing that to me, that makes it seem like this decision of conception. In reality, it's the decision of that 20 years that's this heavy, weighty thing.
I understand.
The reason why
it's not a heavy, weighty thing for people is because they have already proved themselves imbeciles by having kids in the first place.
Well, it's because it happens generally without a rational thing. It's one of these things
that's
just
right.
like falling in love with the wrong
because they're
person.
Imbeciles. That's right. It happens because they're imbeciles. Smart people like me would never have a kid, right? Because we know right from the beginning, hey, it's a huge, giant responsibility. It's gigantically expensive. What if it all goes wrong? I can't fix it. I could figure all that out when I was fucking 10 years old. And somehow
but you still have
can't figure it out in their entire fucking lifetime. They can't figure it out.
But you still went through behavior where you accepted that risk, all that.
I never accepted the risk. I made sure every woman I ever stuck my dick into, I said, I don't care whether the condom breaks. I don't care whether magic fairies stick sperm in your uterus. If you get pregnant, you're either going down a staircase or you're getting a fucking abortion, but you ain't having no fucking kid.
Well, that's a risk to think that you could actually pull that off because you don't have
Well,
the
it's
right
no
or legal
problem pulling it
position.
off because
And
every
you're
one of
gonna
the women I
feel
slept
separate
with
from
were
the
exactly of the same frame of mind where they had absolutely no intention to have any goddamn babies.
Yeah, but it's not zero risk that one of them
Well,
would
I'm just
change
saying
their
it's
mind.
zero risk and that both minds have had consent that I will kill you basically.
Definitely not zero
If
Well,
risk.
you still took a risk.
if
That's a
you
horrible thing
violate
to
this
say.
contract, we have a contract. We're having sex. If you violate the contract, I will kill you.
Well, that's disgusting that you'd even say that.
Right,
Well,
and
I would kill a bitch if she tried to have my baby.
oh my god.
Oh my God, really?
Of course I would. You still don't get it, jackass, do you? You really don't get it that people are born into this world and they are tortured, you fucking
Oh, but you
crazy
just had to
bastard.
have sex.
They
But
are
you just had to have
tortured.
sex. But you just had to have sex. I mean, you could have just not had sex.
I'm
But
just
instead,
saying a contract is
your
a
answer to the
fucking
risk.
contract, okay? If
Your
you tell
risk.
somebody you're not going to have a child, you have no
Now you're
fucking
You're
alone.
right.
going to mitigate your risk with. You're going to mitigate with your risk with murder. Is
I'm
still.
going, no, it's not murder. It's a
Took the risk.
contract, shithead.
You took the risk. No,
It's
most
a
contracts
fucking
don't have death.
contract. Do you know the
No.
word contract?
It's
The
illegal
US
to have a
are such
contract
weaselly lying
that
scum
requires death.
that you can't even make contracts. You're
can't-
such
you don't get
liars
killed
and
for breaking a
compulsive
contract.
liars that you don't even have the integrity
You
to
don't get to kill
defend a
somebody if they break a
contract.
contract. You don't get to kill somebody of
Yes,
a
you
contract.
do. We kill people all the time for violating the social contract.
Oh my God.
What happens if the social contract,
I mean, what the
Right.
fuck? You're playing God. What is a murderer doing? He's playing God. What are you doing when you're creating a life? You're playing fucking God.
So you're no better than them then. You're no better than
I
an
had
alien.
part of my cervix removed.
No, you think it's the same exact thing. What I'm saying is that there's a contract that we don't kill each other. That's the social contract. I'm saying that shouldn't be violated. I'm also saying it shouldn't be violated that you don't have a right to create living things and play with them for your own entertainment.
I hate to jump in here and interrupt the second round of the Republican debates, but what is
Come on, it's just a joke. It's just a joke. Calm down.
what is the
Fuck yourself. Fuck yourself.
You have to
Fuck
let him talk.
yourself. Fuck.
You have to let him talk, Gary. Fine.
it's okay. He doesn't have to.
That's the most horrible thing I've ever heard Gary say by a mile. And
What was the original premise or question, if you don't mind me asking?
well, I was pointing out that, and actually, in a sense of adding weight to the anti-natalism argument, it was occurring to me that, they talk about basically the parent doesn't have the right to play God and bring a non-existence into existence. They're taking an unacceptable risk. And really, it's decisions like, do I get circumcised? Am I, Christian Scientist, I don't go to the doctor. Am I, all of these decisions and all the millions, subtle ones for 18 years or whatever, or a lifetime possibly. Well, no, let's just stick with childhood. Let's just say the first 10 years, where you're really dealing with somebody that if they acted like that as an adult, they have a mental disability, they obviously need care, and you have to make all these life and death decisions for them. And so that's kind of a heavy thing. Do parents have the right to make such decisions? And then it went from that into my pointing out that he had taken the risk of procreating, and so he can't say it's a totally unacceptable risk because he's taken that risk. And then his answer was that no, he hasn't taken that risk because every woman he ever slept with understood he would kill her if she didn't get an abortion. And Phil was saying,
Well, nobody really got a chance. I don't suppose to ask him. I mean, he said that, but did he actually ever get a chance to sleep with anybody given those parameters?
no, he did say that. He did say that. And in fact, I know that, Gary has a couple lost loves there.
Okay. Well, I mean, with anti-natalism, I think the primary argument, well, not primary, I shouldn't say, but one of the arguments, problems I have with it is, how can you have a moral obligation for something that does not yet exist?
Exactly.
It's the life. Yeah, you haven't brought a life into the world yet. How can I have a moral obligation to it? It doesn't.
Well, I think I can answer that easily. I think the
Okay.
arguments are much more compelling than that. I
Okay.
believe in a pro-choice answer is why I'm against it, but I fully understand the answers. It's the same thing of like, well, let's say I pollute a lake where nobody has a house yet. Or I pollute the water table, but it's going to go down into the water table. It's going to take 40 years before it comes back up somebody's well. Nobody that's going to be hurt exists yet.
Yeah.
Right, but I think there's a difference there in that with the lake or with the water table. The lake and the water table aren't the sentient beings that you're causing pain, or that that's not where your obligation to. Your obligation is to people, is to other people that you're not directly
Hey, Vic.
involved with. In other words, right? You're polluting the lake. That's fine, but that isn't. It's not quite the same, I don't think, as saying that.
I'm just saying it's dangerous to pretend you don't have an obligation to this future being. Like when they're brought into existence, most of us now agree that that's an obligation. But like, again, this HBO special on sports parents showed this side where parents that think they were and might be doing the best thing for their kids, was whoever Serena's dad is, I forget, Venus Williams' dad,
Yeah.
He was one of these stage parent kind of sport parents, but on the other hand, it's hard to argue that he didn't give them a career, that they like and everything. But a lot of them, that's not going to happen, and they're really just really mean to their kids. And so, these kinds of questions are: do you have the right to bring someone into existence? Do you have an obligation when they're in existence to think about their future? And it doesn't have to be from their point of view, or can it be your point of view? It's pretty heavy stuff.
I would agree that
the kids have to suffer and be so into what they're doing, and then they may not. There's a very small percentage that make like the WNBA and the NBA and all that stuff that people push towards.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think
letting the relaxing and letting the children figure out what they can do is a lot better. I mean,
I think that well, clearly, I mean, if you don't think that you're going to be a good parent, okay, then sure. It doesn't make much sense. If you think you're a crappy parent, or you have some reason to believe you're going to be a crappy parent, it probably isn't the brightest thing in the world to bring a child into the world and have to live with you. But there's the other side to that coin, and that is you may feel that you're going to be a perfectly fine parent. Okay, there's no argument that somebody can produce that's going to say, well, I know you're going to be a crappy parent and you shouldn't have a child. So if I believe I'm going to have a loving home and I'm going to treat my child well and I'm going to take care of them well and I'm not going to go overboard, if you will, like sports parents or people that push their children onto beauty pageant runways, when they're 3 and 4 years old, why shouldn't I have a child?
Well, see, I have mixed feelings about that because there's something about these child prodigies. You can't just, I think Michael Jackson's dad was obviously abusive, and you can blame him even though his son became famous and whatnot. I don't think he looked like he turned out happy. But you can't totally say some parents are coaches, and geez, that's where, it's an amazing thing sometimes,
I want to also say that you don't necessarily...
I'm mostly against it. I'm playing devil's advocate, right?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Like, for instance, my kid, we have a whole library and stuff like that. So you don't, like, if you're teaching them tons of stuff and you're having fun with it and you're going hiking and you're doing stuff and whatever, that's just all you can do is try to teach them. The education is the most important part, because they're not going to get as good of education without the parents' help, without parents helping their kids get it.
Yeah, this is probably not a great argument either, but still, I'll throw it out there. And that's we have suicides, obviously, in the world. For a variety of reasons, everything from my 16-year-old teenage sweetheart broke my heart, to I'm 90 years old and I've lived a good life and I want to end it, and everything in between. But still, given the population of the world, it's clear that the vast majority of people choose or prefer to continue with their life in spite of the fact that it includes pain, suffering, and everything else, and they don't end their lives. So from a statistical standpoint alone there, I would think you could make the case that it is more rational to bring the child in the world, that the likelihood that they will appreciate their life in whatever form it takes, they're far more likely to appreciate it, preferable to non-existence, than not. So
that it's according to your situation, though, because I mean, if you all of a sudden find yourself pregnant, you're not going to be a great. I just really think that people need to just embrace choice and realize that any answer is okay in somebody else's eyes. Get it circumcised, don't get it circumcised, you know.
yeah, I mean circumcisions. I mean, I'm
Personally,
I'm
big
I'm
with my
kind I'm kind of with. Well, who was the guy with the curly white curly hair? The guy was yelling and then left.
That's in
Gary.
Mendham.
Pardon me.
In Manhattan,
Okay. Well, like he was saying,
or Gary for
oh,
short.
I'll do Gary. Thanks for the moment. Okay. I mean, Gary had a point, at least in that series of shouting there, which was that of course it is. If you have the child, clearly the parent has to be able to make decisions on behalf of the child until the child's of such an age or maturity that he can make them intelligently for himself. So clearly, if we're going to say that if circumcision is going to happen at all, it's going to happen as an infant for the most part. That's not always true, but for the most part, yes, the parent has to make that decision.
He is the anti-natalist guy.
Yeah.
So because he's the guy who has decided that, the suffering and all that, then I personally don't think that circumcision, it is like an unnecessary pain. I mean, I didn't necessarily care which way it happened with my son, but then when it happened, it was actually obviously his father that decided, and he's like, why? Why should we get,
Well,
why
Well, I guess I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that really, except to say that I mean, as a kid, I fell off my bike more times than I can remember. Each one of those probably caused more pain than I suffered at my circumcision, and I don't remember any of them.
But right.
So
doesn't mean it's not in your. The point is that we can't even really discuss this in a way that whatever, because he's the guy that's.
What I don't get when some anti-natalists.
That's the only reason I think that.
Well, it may not be true of all anti-natalists, but I have met some, who are, the basic argument is that, bringing the child in the world is morally wrong because it not only causes suffering to the child, but it also, and here's the key, but it also impacts future generations in terms of utilization of resources or bringing more pain generally into the world, into the universe, however you want to phrase it. And I'm always puzzled by that latter part of the reasoning process, because that would seem, if you to me, to imply that if you really believe that you would be killing yourself as quickly as possible because your continued existence is doing the same thing. So if that really is your concern, then why are you still here?
Okay.
Not to be mean, I don't want them to all go commit suicide. Let me put that in there just in case anybody tries to grab a soundbite.
Well, I can tell you what Gary's response would be to that. He would say that it's because he's more valuable alive than dead. He can spread the message of antinatalism and therefore prevent more suffering.
Well, isn't that
by entering into contracts for
yes, isn't that convenient?
Alfred, you would at least acknowledge that when you do decide to bring a child into the world, it is not a selfless act. It is purely for you, right?
Yeah.
And okay.
Plus an accident.
I don't have a problem with that. Yeah.
Right. So so basically you're looking at the situation, you're evaluating your circumstance, and you're deciding, okay, it is for me, but I figure it's not going to be a bad thing in the end, probably.
Yeah, I don't think.
You think it's a risk worth taking.
I think pain is part of life. Nobody ever. There's no such thing as that kind of a utopia where you could live an entire life and never suffer any kind of pain or suffering. It doesn't exist, and it's
yeah. But
for me that's an absurdity to even hope for.
It's not just pain. I mean, unless you're arguing against like a pinprick antinatalist. But not all of them are pinprick antinatalists. Some people are just they just think that the risk, it's not just about, minor levels of pain. There is the potential that you might,
I might give birth to the next Hitler, right?
Always.
No, not just the more, yeah, but also a child that ends up with some horrible disease or gets in a horrible accident, gets mangled.
Yeah,
a lot of things that would make that life not worth living.
Right.
And is that
That's
a risk?
but that's the key. But I'm sorry. I just wanted to let me that last statement that you said that it's not worth living. But again, that is clearly very much a matter of perspective. So while I may look, for example, at a child who's was born with half a brain, or was born is severely Downs, or has some other or has multiple sclerosis, is going to suffer for whatever. Whether their life is worth living can only be answered by them.
Okay, well, let's use that logic then. So let's imagine you know for a fact that
Yeah.
a kid is going to be born with some sort of congenital disease that
Okay.
causes him immense amount of suffering.
Sure.
And you know this for a fact. It's going to happen.
Okay.
And it's going to have to live this way for the rest of its life.
Yeah.
Now, you can argue just as you just did. It's like, well, I'm not going to make that decision. I'm going to leave it up to him to decide.
No, okay. Let me clarify what I meant then. But okay, let me clarify what I meant there, Vic. I was speaking to somebody who already exists, and trying to make that decision. If no one exists yet, right? But I know, like as you said, that this is going to be the result if I do procreate.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would choose not to procreate, because there is at this moment there is.
But you know that there's a risk of that.
Well, if I know
happening.
for certain that it's going to happen, okay. So two scenarios. If I know for certain it's going to happen, I probably would choose not to procreate, okay. Because at this juncture there is only one person's voice, which is mine. The other one doesn't exist yet, okay. So I am not going to intentionally bring a child into the world that is.
Yeah, so that argument, what I'm saying is that argument kind of goes out the window. It's like, well, we can't really decide what is a life worth living. Yeah, we kind of can.
Well, we can before we bring it in, yes.
Pregnant, and you find out that it has, some horrible, like, fused bones or something like, horrible thing. Now, because I'm clarifying, are you pro-life, or would you understand that sometimes things would be suffering if it
Ask me again, Elthea. I'm sorry. I was halfway there and I lost you at the end.
Okay, you have sex. We talked about that. You don't have contracts, whatever.
Right.
Okay, somebody is pregnant and you find out, oh, it has this horrible fused bone disease where it's
Sure.
going to not, it's going to be in pain, maybe breaking bones multiple times.
That's a philosophy thing. Nietzsche said you have to say no to things in order to say yes.
Right.
You want to say yes in life, but you got to say no in order to make the world you can say yes to.
Well, I think the anti-natalism. I think the response.
He's willing to go. That was a question to him. But does he understand that argument?
Sure. I think. I'll try and thread a needle here. I think that. Yeah, clearly, if that happens, you have sex with someone, you realize, you do have a biopsy, and you determine child's going to be born with X, Y, Z. I think that is clearly a discussion point that you and the person and your spouse or your partner needs to have, and you need to make a decision, and maybe a very painful decision to make. But I think you do need to make that one way or the other. I agree, and you may end up saying no, we don't want to do this, or you may end up saying, well, maybe it's not as bad as it seems, and you decide yes. I can't speak to that, because I think that is that's a one-off. Every couple needs to make that decision on their own. I do think, though, from the perspective of somebody who is an anti-natalist, I can appreciate and I can agree with the sentiment that says to somebody else, you need to think about the consequences of you bringing another child into the world before you do it. I absolutely agree with that. I think it's foolhardy not to. What I don't agree with is when it turns into preaching that you absolutely should not, because I decided that it's too risky to bring. Well, who the fuck care? Who are you? I don't think you get to tell somebody else when they've reached that risk line.
Well, they get to say it, but
with.
we get to ignore it, right? So
say that again. I'm sorry.
They get to say it, we just get to ignore it. So
well, they do say it, yeah, and that's the problem I have with it. It's one thing to say that I should consider that, and I think that's a viable thing to say. It's another thing to say that I have to come to the same conclusion you do. You can bite me. Mm-hmm. I clearly don't, and I'm not a bad person because I don't.
Yeah, I think the anti-natalist movement would be better served if it was less I don't know, radical. Like, because their agenda seems, in many cases, is to like basically end the species, or even
Yeah.
end all life. Period.
I think the
Right.
See, the
more
But
thing
if
is, that's
instead,
funny.
if instead they were a little more reasonable
See,
and they
this
were
is what
just
I want
trying
to talk
to
about a little
get,
bit.
I
Is
don't think that
in activism in general, no, because here's what goes on. It's like, oh, you'd be more reasonable if you just said it more reasonably. No, they said reasonable things in any feminism, any activism. They get a tremendous amount of pushback, and they have to go way past reasonable to make any progress. And if the people that were fighting them didn't fight, they're the ones being counterproductive, because the reason the pendulum swings too far is because by the time you get to where the pendulum's supposed to be, it's because somebody's had to fight way too hard and push too hard to get to the middle. There wasn't a balance.
right.
It's the
well,
lack of the
And,
rational
and you know
I
counterbalance is
think
also to blame for it swinging too
it's
far.
going to end. They're realist about it. They realize that they're taking on the challenge of not doing it because there's all these people out there who's never going to stop having baby after baby after baby. And so it's not, that's the problem, is that we're trying to make progress on this idea that it's a responsibility and you need to think about it, and you need to try to realize what the state of the world is before you bring children into the
Yeah,
world.
I mean,
That's all.
I think it should be their message should be a little more reasonable, a little more palatable to the mainstream. For instance, just anybody who's an alcoholic, anybody who suffers from chronic depression, has a history of chronic depression in their family, people who are like living in squalor. These people should not be procreating, right? And I think that's where their attention should be
Well, I
focused.
have here's an
Why
example.
not? I don't really
Here's
get
a
why
real
that's.
Because the risk goes up tremendously. That child is going to lead a life not worth living.
here's a real life example. My
You know
wife.
what? Everybody that eventually was in the ruling class at some point was in squalor, so they should have just committed genealogical suicide and not gone to become wealthy. I mean, every slave,
Well, when
every
people have
Jewish
children,
family
they're
that
not
owns a bank
thinking.
now was slaves at one point. The Jews should have just stopped having
Yeah, but
kids
Puro,
after
when
the
people
diaspora.
have children, they're not doing it
Slaves,
because they're trying to
slaves shouldn't have
perpetuate.
kids. No, but you're saying they shouldn't have kids, and I'm saying that in
Yes, because
reality,
out of
you're saying slaves shouldn't have kids. So slaves should not have
yeah,
kids.
slaves should not have kids.
But one day they'll be free. Why should they? You're saying that
Then
they
that's
should
when they
never
might.
own.
Then that's when they can consider having kids. When
They
they're
Well,
won't be
free.
free
he's saying
until
their
their
children might
grandchild.
be free one day.
Yeah.
Might.
Yes,
You're going to.
sure,
That's a
sure.
huge
It's always
gamble
happened
that
so
you're
far.
taking.
Sure, it's a might.
No, it's
This
always happened so
kid.
far. Every slave society eventually revolts.
I cannot believe that you're advocating that slaves should have children.
I didn't say they should. I said you're wrong that they shouldn't.
Wow.
You don't see the difference? I'm saying it's a personal decision.
Yeah, I
Just like
think you're. I
always.
think it. Yeah, of course, it's corporate. It's at the end of the day, it's always a personal decision.
And
But
so
I
a
would say
slave
it's an
could
immoral.
easily
It's an
say that.
immoral decision. I would consider it patently immoral for a person in that
I
state,
think
knowing that the
owning a slave.
likelihood
And
that
yet,
that
and
child
you're
is going
saying
to
that
suffer.
the owners of the slaves, they can have kids, and that's moral.
They can do it, but they would be immoral if they did it.
No, but what about the slave owners? It's moral for them to have kids, right? Wait, it's moral for the slave owners to have kids, though.
Well,
They're rich.
if they're gonna be creating more slaves, then maybe
They're rich.
not. No.
Right, then maybe not. That's the catch.
How am I crazy nerdy people doing today rather than arguing as usual?
Oh my fucking god, it's Stizor.
I'm pretty sure you could be more productive than fucking sticking dildos in each other.
Stizor, what are you doing, buddy?
I've just joined because I've only just got the fucking link.
Look at me, Stizor. Look at my picture. See who this is?
Yeah, I know it's you. What have I got the weird fucking what Alfred?
What? I know.
Hey, welcome to the world, Stizor. There you go, buddy.
That's a bit left.
Does he have a real name?
I have a real
I've
name,
seen
yeah.
you before in different hangouts, but I don't know what your actual name is. Or what
Yeah,
your YouTube
Carlton.
channel
I
is.
know,
is nice.
I know Alfred.
But you
I
can
just
use
that
Alfred.
man's got the weird fucking Alfred for his name. This is actually a good friend of mine from G Plus. You got well, for people who know G Plus and stuff. He's actually a really cool dude. He's a secularist advocate. He's a bit old school, but his intentions.
I've been old school. What the hell?
Well, I mean, I wrote that. That was supposed to be a fucking compliment.
I'm sorry. Okay. Gee, thank you. Okay, thank you.
So I was giving you a compliment. Oh,
Well, I'm old school.
that's
I
just
didn't
the way it
recognize
is.
it as such.
I feel like I'm in a fucking Batman movie all of a sudden.
I know. Anyway, sorry. Nice to see you, Sty.
I have a question for you here. So we're talking about the slave system and whatever. Have you seen the stuff that's been blowing up this week about the takeover of Fed.org by Fed.gov and all that?
I will be honest and say no. That hasn't come across my political sandbox yet. But I will say.
Oh, that's been here, but I don't think.
No, wait. In regard, I'll try and answer this in an overview and be as gentle as possible and as quick as possible. In an overview, slavery still happens today. It's called the monetary system. We basically employ people on the other side of the planet to make our goods for next to fucking nothing, basically, which is a bit of a shame.
Well, let me tell you a little bit. So Yellen came out. She's the lady that I can't remember her exact title. I have short-term memory issues, but anyways, she's the lady who like tells you what's going on in the financial world. She basically came out saying that there's going to be a controlled crash, and that they're finally getting down to the bottom of the Fed.org, Fed.gov thing, because a lot of people in the government thought that they had changed it when they changed it to the .gov, and they did it, and so they're really actually maybe heading for a reset. I'm gonna cross my fingers.
Okay, well, I don't know whether you're talking about the financial system or something else, but the financial system already crashed. It's literally already on its ass. The problem is the governments have tried their best, which have failed miserably, as they always do, to keep the system going. It's basically there's a patient on the table who is dying. That is our global economic system. He fucking died a long time ago. We're trying to keep that fucker going, and it's dead. It literally is. No, it is. Listen, the United Kingdom has like negative interest rates. Okay, there's only so many tools a government can use to manipulate the money supply. We have run out of options.
But the thing is, wait. But the thing is, the actual productive output of the world is huge.
Yes,
and
I know,
that's
but
the real economy. So it's not going to collapse just because a bunch of guys.
No. The idea of how the world should work is dying. That's the point.
Yeah,
which is technically called capitalism. Capitalism is literally dead. The reason why it's going to die is because capitalists, in their nature, have always been isolationists, right? They always want to protect their interests and countries. When the globalization that they promoted, thinking that would benefit them, is actually the very thing that's going to actually fucking destroy them and bring about a new type of socialism. And you can see that with Bernie Sanders. You can see that with the rise of Jeremy Corbyn in the United Kingdom. Socialism is now the new, basically, capitalism, where social justice actually makes a fucking difference in the world. When Elon Musk makes batteries and all this crazy shit, it's because the people want that to be the case. No one gives a fuck about how rich you are. We give a fuck about each other and the planet. Capitalists hate that fucking shit. They rely on your fucking greed and ineptitude. So
Right. Yeah.
the system's changing. It's not fluffy or crystals or any of this woo-woo shit. It's literally, we are evolving as a species to actually learn. Well, wouldn't it be a great idea for once if we fucking work as a team? Therein lies the problem. Capitalists don't understand that the mentality of the human beings is changing to become something more than just greed equals winner, when it's not. It's actually people to people, goodness equals
Right,
winner.
and that's because there's so many. I mean, I just see it as there's so many people on the ground level now who are just living with way less money. I mean, and just dealing with it and learning how to be, whatever. I mean, my town is so different from what it would have been, what it was 10 or 15 years ago. I live in a tourist town in the Appalachian Mountains, and it's the, you learn to deal with what you have, and you learn to barter, and you learn that you have a pile of crap that you can possibly trade for other things you need. Because seriously, I go to the the food bank once a month because it looks like I have a lot of crap, but on the day-to-day stuff, we got rid of our car 6 years ago and whatever. But that's because we're in a small town and we have the opportunity to do that. But it was the best. I mean, it changed my life for the good, personally.
Well, I just, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but in this case, that the entire point of money is to manipulate other human beings. Well, human beings have got to the point where money should be a tool to benefit human beings, and this is the dynamic we find ourselves in. We all know that the system we have can benefit the human race in the sense if it's a fair playing field. But when people own 40, 50, 60% of the wealth of a nation, as a company, as a family, this goes beyond fair. It gets to the point of ridiculous, and that's why you've seen Bernie Sanders occupy Wall Street, the whole bullshit with Iraq. The entire Western media is ignoring the same thing that happened. We call it the Arab Spring, right? That we got told on the media, oh, the Arab Spring. Well, there's actually the same thing that's happened in the West, but if they dare report it,
right, it becomes a racist thing. I mean, I know that there's a whole setup thing to collapse, to cause problems with the system changing and whatever, but
they're scared of it.
Yeah,
the people who are used to being in charge are very much scared of the plebs. It's always been that way. But then, if you look at history, we always chopped off the heads of people who were in power to show an example of the fact that we're not beasts of labor. We're not slaves. We're not commodities. We will say, no, it's unjust. And, there's so many people who have fought for the same things, women's rights, gay rights, black rights, all these things that were prohibited by the rich, right? And these people don't literally give a fuck what we think. We need to make sure that they understand, no, it's our game, it's our rules, not their game and not their rules. We're quite happy to be, subdued.
What most people don't understand is that it doesn't matter if you're black or you're poor or you're gay or you're whatever, because of the way the system's made up. It's made up to discriminate against you as not being a rich person, and that's just real. It doesn't matter if you're white or black. Around here, we don't have many black people, but I get racism for being Cherokee. The rest of my family's like blonde. I have like the honey blonde, so like I'm like the half breed.
Yeah, but even if you're a white person, right, who wants a job, you get discriminated against because there's some like arbitrary shit that you need. No,
the system is set up so that the rich people make more money, and that's really what it's all about. It's all about making you feel isolated and like.
It's divide and conquer at this point. That's what it is. It's divide everybody who are poor, right? To make them fight against themselves while we keep being rich. That's exactly what's going on. But
and make money from war.
I think what we're trying to do. I think this goes across every race or gender. I think everybody's waking up that we're being fucked over by the people who apparently know what they're talking about, and they don't, because it hasn't worked so far. And I think this is the beauty of human interaction and the internet, which I just think is the best thing since Jesus. I don't think Jesus exists, but let's say Jesus does. It's the best thing since Jesus. We can communicate on such a vast scale as human beings that we can just go, oh no, we're not putting up with that shit. People in China, people in Venezuela, people in Brazil, people in the USA can talk to me or Sweden or Russia and go, we all agree.
People that you like, you know, and you gravitate towards certain groups and all this kind of stuff like that based on your interests. And it's just, yeah, it's awesome. Of course, everybody believes that the
Well,
internet.
we cross boundaries of ignorance, and that's what I love about the internet. It crosses so many boundaries, and it's so instantaneous. Where my government and your government may not be the same entity, but we as people, we can change both of our governments by going, you know what, that actually works.
The idea that there's all these lines that were drawn at some point, making everything totally separate, is just ridiculous. And when you start networking with people and realizing how much you have in common with other people, you realize that there really isn't any borders or boundaries.
Yeah, they're illusions. Exactly.
Most people don't want war, generally. Most people don't want war. All the war is created by this crazy money system that we have to create more money out of suffering. It's horrible.
It's governments who implement laws and drag the population into them.
Well,
that's a fact.
Yeah. It's
well, look at America, right? America gets a bad name, right? But you ask the majority of human beings if they like Americans, they say yes, right? But they will also say, but we hate their government. That's the problem, right? So they're saying specifically.
Coming more to.
Well, that's because it's been turned into a caricature. I mean, it really has been turned into a caricature.
But that's the point. We've let them caricature it, though, right? We've let them do that in certain regards.
I think that's why a lot of people are changing their minds more recently, is because the Trump thing is so forced it into like this. Okay, how far can he go to alienate people and it not happen? So he's rallying the people who want war and want, all this. Like, anybody who has anger and wants revenge, that's who he wants. It's just ridiculous.
Athena, do you actually think that? I mean, I can't stand Donald Trump. Donald Trump is disgusting. But I'm just saying, Athena, do you actually think? Do you actually think that Donald Trump wants to start wars to profit? Like, do you seriously think that?
In some regards, I think he does. Unwittingly, though.
This is the caricature of American government that I'm talking about.
No, it's not. It's actually what he said. I did. Hold on, Athena.
And it's because they brought up to think that revenge is the only thing important. Revenge.
Athena, it's one thing to say that his tactic is simple-minded, it won't work, blah, blah, blah. But it's another thing to say that he is deliberately going towards this type of policy because it's for nefarious reasons.
No, I don't think he is, and that's even more scarier than the other side of what you just said. And that's the point I'm trying to make, Vic. If you're saying to me, he's not aware of the stupid shit that comes out of his mouth, that's even more scary than the fact that he'd be willing to say it, right? Well,
because there we can't even predict what he's going to do because he's doing shit just out of stupidity.
Hold on. I don't want to, but I'm going to use the Hitler card. Imagine Hitler versus Donald Trump, right? And Donald Trump is like, well, blah, blah, blah. I'm just a dumbass. And Hitler's like, oh no, I'm going to kill the Jews. Hitler would still fucking win because he's a lot more fucking articulate.
Well, at least you know what Hitler's trying to do, so you can kind of plan against it. But when you have an idiot in power, it's like, what the fuck? Honestly, it's scary. The prospect of Donald Trump in the White House as president
is not even scary. It's
terrifying. Because I honestly don't know what he's capable of doing. Like I could see the guy on a whim deciding to nuke a country. Like I could see that happening.
Yeah, just nuke him. I was just like, okay.
It's just so insane.
World War III instantly. It's just you know what? We can joke about it, right? Which is funny, obviously. But I can't see the American population going, we're gonna start. I don't think that's going to happen. I think people
blaming again from unknown sources, and we have no idea what's going on. It's
I
all
mean, I have to say, I'm a fairly curious person. So the curious part of me is wonders what it would be like to run a country like a business. And since Donald Trump is a fairly
Thanks.
savvy
Thanks.
businessman as far as we know, right? It would be interesting to see how it would turn out. Unfortunately, he's such an idiot and so um, he just lacks the necessary knowledge in foreign policy and stuff to really be an
doing
effective
whatever.
leader. I wouldn't be able to take that risk, but it would be interesting to see what would happen if it was run like a well-run company. Um, I don't know. Unfortunately, it doesn't even matter anyway, because even if his ideas were absolutely stellar and they would actually work, we don't live in a dictatorship, so he doesn't have the power to actually affect any of these policies himself. He has to somehow convince Congress to write
Right.
these bills so that he can sign them into law. So, our
Yeah.
system it's kind of fucked.
Yeah. People can say whatever they want. Trump can. That's why
Yeah,
he can say whatever he
he
wants.
could be brilliant, and it wouldn't
No,
even matter. That's why it's hard to get excited for a president.
it really is, and so that's it's hard. But I personally would like to see if Bernie Sanders could run it, but I mean, I don't know about, like you said, the same thing of you get in there and you're completely tied to the wall. You know what I mean? You want all these things, but it's not necessarily going to happen.
Obama had the best opportunity to put whatever his ideas were into practice because, in his first term, he basically, I think the Democrats controlled both houses of Congress, so they had everything, right? They had everything right there on a
That's
silver
like,
platter.
yeah,
But they
Democrats
couldn't
are
even get their
really,
team together to do anything. So, and Bernie Sanders, if he were to win, like, he would have to somehow find a way to get Congress to, I don't know, work together and not to be so deadlocked all the time because
yeah.
it's
Because I mean, they know that if they don't want something, they can just tie things up.
yeah, that's why
It's really bad.
the two-party system to me is just it's so fucked
Yeah.
because there's always this constant back and forth, one side trying to sabotage the other side, and it's you
I think
never get
parties
anything
are
done.
corrupt. Parties in general is a corruption of a democratic system. You're supposed to be able to have 100 senators, and they can have a coalition of 60 to do this, and 60 to do that, and 60 to do this other thing, and 60. It's not supposed to be the same 60. And you know about this Hastert rule, who Hastert just did a plea deal, but anyway. Where that Bonnier also did, where they wouldn't even bring something up to a vote in the Congress if a majority of the Republicans weren't for it. So if you had a minority of Republicans, say, 120 Republicans were for it, but not a majority, or whatever it would be the number, let's say if they joined together with the Democrats, they'd be able to pass something. The Republican leadership wouldn't even bring it up. So you had a majority of the Congress wanting something, because some of the minority of Republicans did, and they wouldn't bring it up. That's a corruption, and how do you not have that with the party? You almost can't blame the party for wanting to think of things that way, but maybe there could be a law or something, but basically I think the problem is parties are corrupt. It's a
Right.
wrong way to do democracy. You should have a party that's the caucuses.
We
All the
should, right.
people that want bike paths should
Yeah,
get
and the
together.
problem is that in order
I
to
agree.
create this system, these are the people that need to be persuaded. But of course, because they have self-serving reasons, they're looking. And again, you can understand it, right? Because these are people who are trying to make a living, right? They need to, earn money. They have to win their next election. So they're not going to do something to like sabotage themselves potentially. So and that's the problem.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
this
it
is
goes
something
different.
that needed to be instituted a long time ago.
Nick, it goes deeper in a way, I think, because and a little more sympathetically, even though I think it's all a lot of corruption and this financial stuff you're talking about. But let's think of it this way too: it's just that people think that they know best, and they don't think that the majority knows best. They don't think they have to agree with the majority, and they shouldn't. It's called individualism. But thus, when you get individuals in positions of office, they often have seen themselves as fighting the majority, even if they're benevolent. They have to do something for the majority for its own good that the majority doesn't understand, and that's kind of the problem. Because I'm a liberal. I would like to say, well, I do believe the majority gets to rule, but that's just saying the majority gets to make the mistakes that we learn from. And but do I really think the majority is right? No. So how do you not work for what you think is better? You have some idea that you're a step ahead of the majority. How is it going to be that somebody in a position of power doesn't work for what they think is best? You know what I mean? Forget the corruption. Even if they're being really honest, you know, they're going to work for what's the best. And if they think the country is being overrun by communists, they're going to try to fight communists. And it doesn't. They're worried that the majority believes that. They're not giving in to the majority. So anyway,
politics is really, really difficult. I mean, I would hate to be a politician because there's really no clear-cut answer for any of these political problems, right? I mean, any solution you come up with is going to have some sort of disadvantage.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Well, I think you have
disagree a little bit. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I'll try to remember.
Okay. Well, be that as it may, I do think that it's a problem, and it's exacerbated when you have so many idiots in Congress who are politicians, right? Who, I mean, even if they were geniuses, it would be difficult. It would be a difficult problem to tackle. But it's even worse. That problem's even is compounded by the fact that so many of them are so dumb. I mean, I mentioned in our last hangout, there's a congressman who was actually asking a general. Whether there was he was concerned that we had too many people on the left side or whatever, on one of the sides of Guam, the island of Guam, and he was afraid that the island would capsize as a result of that. It's like unbelievable.
Yeah, that guy's crazy. Yeah. No,
yeah,
it was
he thinks
incredible.
He thinks islands are like canoes, like just floating around on the ocean.
Well, it's not quite even that simple, because he tried to put off as a joke later, but here's the thing: it obviously wasn't. And I think this guy is
and there are plenty of examples like that. It's just like
I think
one
that guy
example.
is an opiate addict. He was having, they have like you have a little
so,
crazy moment right there.
Yeah, so I mean, in my opinion, you need to.
It's beyond stupidity. In other words, it's even worse.
There needs to be some sort of litmus test on.
Well, that's the problem right now.
Basic
The current
intelligence qualifications.
Personalities of psychos in charge, because you have to have like a certain personality to even get into the door.
You gotta blame the voters, Vic.
Well, no, because the thing, the districts
that districts that these people, 2008 or something.
The districts that these people come from, they're very unsophisticated people, uneducated, etc. So he's like the cream of the crop, but it's like, a big fish in a small pond, and that's why he keeps winning, I would assume, right? He comes from these very poor districts, and these people are uneducated, and yeah, he's better than the people running in that particular district, and that's why he keeps on winning. But yeah, these people shouldn't even be eligible, in my opinion. Right. And then there's the issue of just ideological differences, and this is what I think makes politics so difficult. Is that there could be two people who have the same data, they're both intelligent, but they have fundamentally different approaches to the problem, and since just because of the nature of the problem, like some of these sociological problems you can only test whether it works after like decades, right? You can't tell right away. It's not like science, right? Where you can just go into a lab, you can run a couple of experiments, and boom, now you know, right? With these sociological things, with politics, you have to like institute it, and that's hard enough as it is, and then you have to keep that plan in place for quite a while to see if it's actually working or not. And since the populace is typically so short-sighted, right? They want results now. If they don't see any immediate results, they immediately want to change it. They want to start again from start from scratch. It's really, really hard, Carol. I don't know how you think that politics is easy.
I didn't say it was easy. But I was saying it was hard.
Well, then, what were you disagreeing with?
It wasn't. I was saying it was even more difficult, because even if you take out the corruption, now I think if we take out the corruption, things will be a lot better. But even if you take out the corruption, there's inherently difficult things about if you have an idea that isn't, it doesn't. Good ideas don't start out being the most popular ones. So even if you're benevolent, there's a very difficult decisions of when you're trying to do things, at what point for people's own good,
Right.
and
And
you
even
try to
like
do
this,
things, and
Yeah,
when
and
do you
that's the
submit
thing.
to
Like
the majority?
some of these
and
politicians,
even in
right?
hangouts, you can't control people's ideas. You know, I mean, that's the problem. Is you get all these different personalities together, and it's just like that kind of deal where people are like, so people need to be more open-minded instead of, you know, so locked into a belief maybe. But I mean, that's like a whole humanity thing. You
Yeah, I
know?
mean, and I think this is one of the problems that's plaguing, for instance, the people who are, uh, advocating for reform when it comes to climate change. It's because people don't really care about effects that are going to happen 50 years from now or whatever, right? It's all about now. What affects me now? And when any sort of politician wants to, make policy changes that look to the future, like our kids and our kids' futures and their kids, even if when it comes at our expense, nobody wants to do it. They're not electable really, so they lie a lot of times. So, and this leads to the idea that there's corruption, that people are lying. And it's not necessarily that they're corrupt; it's that they realize that there's just no way to even get elected unless you tell people what they want to hear. And then once you're in office, then you have a chance to actually do
Yep.
something.
Yeah,
Um,
so one of the problems with Hillary Clinton that my conservative uncle has convinced me of is that, she's liberal enough that some of her views overline with me, but not really, because really I do believe she's almost a Stalinist. I believe she's elitist. This is a thing that happened,
yeah,
right?
I get that
Right,
same
Vic?
sense.
I
Yeah,
agree.
Vic, in the Soviet Union, right, it's like Marx said that capitalism had to grow, right, and then it would lead to communism. But then with the whole international and the revolutionary movement, they went straight from having a king, the czar, and they were going to skip the capitalist stage. And there were lots of, there was a major minority, I think they were called the Bolsheviks instead of the Bolsheviks or something, that said you couldn't do that. You had to get rid of the king, start your capitalist stage until people, on their own grew up and got more mature, and instead of toddlers, they were, teenagers, and then they could do it. And so what did they do? The guys that won said, no, we can skip that stage, but they had an ideology where the peasants are idiots. They didn't respect them. They weren't trying to free them because they wanted their wisdom, and so they had to be re-educated. And so there is a danger of that kind of idea. And I think, yeah, I get a little bit of this from Hillary, though I don't think she's literally as bad as Stalin. And like I said, I think she'd probably do some liberal things that I would agree with.
Who's going to win
But why is she all pro-war and everything? Well, there's a little bit of a patrician type attitude that she knows best, and they
Yeah,
will.
I don't like the oligarchy idea, and of course I get off into my same, slavery crap or whatever. But even though would be the first woman president or whatever, I don't care. I
Well,
personally,
yeah, I hate when people say that. You know what? Margaret Thatcher was a
oh
woman.
no,
Like, as a
I mean,
liberal, I'm not convinced by that.
yeah,
You know?
you don't use it as an excuse. And I think that the oligarchy idea and the idea that she already has the end with it does scare me. It scares me. I'm not voting for Hillary Clinton, but
Yeah.
that's personal.
It's hard to imagine a Republican running that I would vote for instead of her, but I would definitely consider Kasich, even though he's not getting anywhere. I don't know if he's dropped out yet, but he's a pretty decent guy. I'd vote for him probably over Hillary. But Trump and all the rest of them, it's like, okay, I'll take Hillary. We've had worse, I mean, I think she's competent and smart. She's no Hank Johnson, that guy you were talking about. So she doesn't think Guam's going to sink.
Bernie, but then after the primary, he gets paired with like Jim Webb, the other guy that's on that side that's like the military guy, and I think that having both things represented would be better.
Interesting. Hey, Vic, did you watch the Democratic debates? You don't seem like a huge political junkie to me, but
I did.
so what did you think of it all? And especially, she was bringing up Webb, and I was like, what was that? My biggest enemy was the guy I killed, and threw.
Well, I should say that I did, but only part of it. I have it on DVR, so I haven't watched the whole thing, but I do plan to watch the whole thing. I watched the entire Republican debate, which was kind of like a circus.
Well, I think it's a
Well, what do you think
But
about that?
I don't know
The
who I want.
Democratic
I don't
debate
know
was
who I'm
less
going
of
to
a
vote at
circus.
this
You got to
point.
give it that, right? I mean, the Democratic debate did make the Democrats look better in the sense that I think it was less of a
Yeah,
circus.
they looked more. They seemed definitely a lot more professional than
Yeah.
Although the one,
Republicans
I
did.
can't remember the guy's
I felt
name.
bad for Lincoln
One guy.
Chafee.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just like
Because I like him. He's good, but I know his career, you know,
seems
so.
like he's gonna get wrote off so easily as one of these. Like
I'm
I
surprised he hasn't
think they
dropped that
wrote him as
already.
like oh crazy ideas
Lincoln?
and
Yeah.
unicorns.
Yeah, I mean, his performance was just one notch below. I can't remember my 3 points, Rick Perry. You know, the
That
whole
was bad.
you should
That
give
was-
me a do-over. Come on, because I could even defend Glass-Steagall. I mean, the defense of Glass-Steagall. I mean, I'm
Right.
against it, but is that if people weren't corrupt, Glass-Steagall would have released capital to be spent in new ways that can
Right.
stimulate the economy, and if it hadn't been used corruptly, which a lot of people thought it would be, and so they were right. But
Yeah.
you can't say, well, but my dad died and I need a do-over. Oh, especially when you have 20 years of voting well. I mean, this is the only Republican that voted against the Iraq War, and as far as liberal, he has every reason to be a Democrat. He's more liberal than half of the Democrats.
Dad died. It was my first day. No, really, it was my first day. My dad died.
And he's not like that is the thing. I followed his career, and
know.
when he's talking about
I know.
ethics, he is a super ethical guy. We could do a lot worse. He's not an idiot. He doesn't just knee-jerk be a liberal. He's smart in that he was a Republican willing to vote his conscience. That proves, as the Republican Party became more radical, he voted his conscience. That's a good thing. And, but he looks so bad. And then Webb, who I don't like, and, I'm glad he looked bad, but he looked a little bit nuts over there. And then O'Malley, they made him look more right wing, and supposedly he's pretty super left and likes to he was calling out the NRA, which is a thing, is like a coyote howling, it's like NRA,
I'll watch the debate sometime this week, and then maybe in our next hangout we can discuss it in more detail. But yeah, right now I'm not even sure. Who are you currently leaning towards voting for? Let me guess, Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, feel the burn.
Do you think he's electable though? Do you really?
I do. I think that because we're in a new age, and
because when I see Bernie Sanders, I gotta say the first thing that I think of is like the crazy doctor from Back to the Future, the mad scientist.
I know. Well, we got to give him a chance because I think he's doing some good things. Like, for example, a lot of people think it's a little crazy he's accepting the socialist label. But look, they call Obama, who's no socialist, a socialist and communist. He might as well just accept it and say, no, let me explain what I mean.
And labels are so, like...
It's a long shot. It's a long shot. But it depends who he runs against, right, on the one hand.
Because I have voted, since I was 18, but everybody I know, including my boyfriend of 18 years, has never actually even voted because they're, liberal and they just think that it's rigged and they just aren't even, whatever. I think that if Bernie wins the primary, which, my boyfriend's still telling me there's no way Hillary's going to win it, but if they win the primary, there's going to be a lot of people that I know who are actually going to go out and vote. But that's, Yeah,
so that's the thing. The same way that Jesse Ventura voted, right? He brought out all these non-voters. So there's a tremendous amount of them if you can have a movement that gets them. But the thing about Bernie that I like is not that I think there could be some, Occupy Wall Street movement. It's that he's not that socialist. He was for the Afghanistan war. He said he would not stop drone bombing, which some liberals that makes him a fascist, and I'm not happy about that. But you know what I mean? Or he's from Vermont. He's not anti-gun, really. They criticized him in the debate for voting against the Brady bill. But
rural against city.
But anyway, he's not as wingish. He's not just from the left wing. He's pretty straightforward, and he's not like just, well, no, you never attack anybody. Of course I was against every war. He's not against every war. So when he was against the Iraq war, like me, I would say, yeah, go get the Taliban. But the Iraq war we were against, so there's actually a lot of rationality in there, and people might be able to see it. But mostly, he's probably unelectable, except for look what the Republicans are doing. I mean, Trump could make it all the way now. He's probably going to fade out like we've all been saying, but it should have happened by now.
I mean, this is my prediction. I think Bernie really is going to win the primary, and I think that if it ends up being Bernie Trump, it'll be like everybody gets to decide if they're going to be, you know, this corrupt, greedy system again, or if we can just try this whole socialism thing, you know? I
I
mean,
personally don't use the Iraq War as a litmus test on whether this person has good foresight
Well,
or
it's not
whatever. It's a
just
good. I mean,
that.
Donald
no,
Trump. Okay, Donald Trump was against the Iraq War as well, and we see what a nutcase he is.
Well,
So
but I was against the Iraq War, so I do like the people that were also against it at the time.
because at the time it seemed so
Shows good
ridiculous.
judgment.
It's like I thought the people came from Afghanistan at first, and then all of a sudden we were going to Iraq, and it was like it seemed so ridiculous to me at the time.
it didn't
I
seem
was like,
ridiculous to me. In fact, I was in favor
You
of
know,
it.
the other thing, if you see the head-to-head polling, Hillary is very unelectable. People hate her. Biden does like 20% better, and Biden's not that likable. But, you know, she's losing in these polls. It doesn't mean much, right? But it's a little bit of an indication. There's a lot of hate for Hillary, so she has a big burden to overcome. If she runs against somebody like Jeb Bush or a vanilla person or Carly Fiorina, you know, she's going to have a really
that's the
hard time.
problem.
And what if this email scandal actually gets more traction and she actually
Right now,
is?
it's not
Yeah.
going to be a vanilla person. They're so
Well, I
high
think it's
on
mood.
this, you know, uh, putting themselves in a box, you know.
I
That
just don't trust Hillary.
Well,
She
the
seems
email
like a
is almost
snake
moot
to
at this
me.
point
She
because
just
people
seems like
don't
so fake. I mean, did you see the SNL skit? It was actually pretty funny because she's
know.
just she seems it was hilarious. You have to see
Yeah.
the Larry David did
yeah.
this impression of Bernie Sanders that is absolutely amazing. You need to see it.
I do. I loved Larry David. I'll
Oh
definitely.
my God, it was so funny. But yeah, and they made fun of her because she seems so scripted and just so fake, just so ugh. She just lacks authenticity, and that's the
Yeah.
vibe that I get
And
from her.
that
Yeah.
what
So I think
that's what
the
makes people
email is a
scared
little
about
bit.
who's pulling your strings,
The
you
email
know.
could almost work in her favor because they know how to handle a scandal like that, and it focuses the heat on something that they have handled. I think it doesn't really matter because people already don't trust her and think that
Well,
she's a little
there's an
bit of
active
a
I'm
elitist.
investigation,
against that, and I
right?
don't.
So, I mean,
Well,
we'll
yeah, no,
see
something
what
could happen.
happens.
Yeah, no, something could. I see what you're saying. Yeah, no, something actual legal could happen that would be a bombshell. Well, this is a
Hmm.
funny thing. I saw like the Young Turks guys were talking about just get rid of the other guys. I just want to see Bernie and Hillary, and it's like that's stupid because people get taken out. Keep your
Yeah.
stable full, my friends. Sure, get
Yeah.
rid of Webb, get rid of Chafee even, but you got to at least keep an O'Malley, and really you should keep all five of them around as long as they'll stay because you never
Right.
know what's going to happen.
Do you
So,
guys think that Donald Trump will ultimately become the Republican nominee? I mean,
I thought it was impossible, but I
I
think it's
think
possible.
I know. I thought that was like crazy.
And
And
Instead
he
of,
has as much right as Sarah Palin or Ben Carson, or you know what I mean. He's not totally a non-person.
I,
I don't want him. I think he's a bully. It'd be crazy what would happen. And
he's
yeah,
erratic. He's
as far
erratic,
as
and
the
he's
nominee,
radical.
maybe
And
the arena is going to do a high leap, but I don't like that because then that would make it harder for my side. But I think that she's starting to learn the things to say because in the past few days she's said some things that have put her back towards the middle.
yeah,
the
I
thing with
really
Donald
disagree
Trump
with
is that
her.
I don't worry so much about like him kicking out a bunch of immigrants and stuff. Because I don't think he has
That'll
the
never
power to
happen.
do that, right?
It'll never
Yeah, he
happen.
doesn't have the power to
I'm
do
not
that.
that
But the thing,
sincere about
but
that.
what he does have the power to do is he controls the military, right? So he can, on a whim, decide to, I don't know, bomb Iran if he wants to. I mean, it just, or bomb
Yeah.
North Korea, and who knows what the fuck that's going to lead to? What sort of chaos that'll lead to?
Well, and he's one of these guys that takes personal offense, so he could go to some meeting and not be respected and bomb him.
Right, and then all the whole like ordeal
Seriously,
that
he thinks that way. Very simple-minded guy.
throw it away, you know? Yeah, it would be crazy.
And yet,
Sounds
you
like-
know what? He's even though we know he's making some of this stuff up, his art of the deal is all about exaggerating. He has more of an air of honesty than a lot of these guys, than the Hillarys, and that's another reason Bernie might pull it off. I think people are actually reacting to that now enough that it could make
It's
them the nominees.
polarizing.
I mean, if he were to actually win,
On the one
my,
side,
my
it's them to polarize and realize the whole. If you try to get these people who are already realizing all these whatever, and then pull back the curtain, we might actually get a Bernie Sanders. or something. But
If he were to actually win, I would hope. I mean, because obviously I can't depend. I wouldn't be able to depend on the first lady because she's just a ditz. I mean, as far as I know, right? That woman is just a pretty face
that's
that he just.
ridiculous anyway. Nobody
Um,
ever had.
but the daughter Ivanka seems very, very intelligent. You know, very level-headed. I would hope that she can keep her dad in check, if he actually becomes president. Um, Man, I hope that doesn't happen,
I
but
think that
Yeah,
it's
I hope
the
that doesn't happen
prospect
either.
is just. Oof.
yeah.
I think 90% of it, you'd be surprised how status quo he is. He knows how to get deals done, and it's done by appealing to how people already think, right? So he's bombastic, but that's part of his sales style. In the end, you know,
Well,
you got to please people.
he's been
The
saying a lot of,
problem is,
but he's been saying a
problem
lot
is,
of this crazy shit before he was even running for
yeah.
president.
Well, right, and the problem is all the things as president you get to do in secret, and you can easily have your little revenge fantasies, and you can do it in secret, and there's people tell, you know, so I think there's a lot of damage and sort of scandal and, you know, on the CIA torture
Oh
prison
yeah.
kind of level
And
of
he's just
stuff.
so narcissistic too. Like he's so power hungry, power driven.
Yeah.
And that's
So
why I think that when you ask me the question, I think he is a
Hillary is
revenge
a little
person.
too.
I think he's somebody that buys into that kind of stuff and probably came from a background of those people who believe in just wars. And I just
Of
think
all the Republicans, the one that I kind of wish would, I mean, the one that I'd have the least problem with if he won the nomination would probably be like Marco Rubio. He just seems more intelligent, more reasonable than the
but
others
somebody's pulling his
in that
string.
camp.
Well, yeah, except for Kasich, I think is pretty good, though. I think that he's liberal enough that some conservatives might think he's too liberal, but pretty much, you know, Kasich is pretty decent. And hopefully, you know, I mean, I'm not thrilled with any of the Marco Rubio, Jeb Bushy ones, but, you know, they're real people, legitimate. And the other thing is this whole having nobody that you owe, that's not what you want. You want a guy that has a group of alliances with other people and with vested interest. You know what I mean? You want them to bring in a crew of all these different skill sets. So, you know,
Well,
I don't
that's
like
one of the
Marco
things that
Rubio, but
Donald.
he doesn't have just enemies. Well, Donald Trump has been
And it's
reviewed by
just
business magazines. He has a bunch of yes men idiots. That's
Oh,
the most
really?
dangerous thing in a
Well, he
government.
claims that he knows all the best businessmen, all the
Yeah,
best,
no. I
economists
forget
and
what it
stuff.
is. You should research it yourself because I don't really remember off the top of my head. But no, like he's, you know, his company has rated as a bad place to work, and that the management and
I don't
the
think he's
the,
smart
the critiques of it at least are, and this is not, I don't think, ideological. My understanding, you know, is that this
enough.
is business press, you know, that he kind of has yes men and stuff. And if you think the kind of businesses he's in, getting big projects built and stuff, they're those kind of businesses, you
But
know.
does he
They
actually
don't hire a bunch
run
of
any
scientists.
Yeah.
business? I mean, does he actually involved in the day-to-day operations of any of his businesses? It seems to me like he
I don't
just
know.
like buys into, he gets on the board of all these different companies
Sets
and
up the
then
I mean,
project.
they handle it.
that's
So it
the
seems like he's an
problem.
investor more than like, I don't know, than actually running a business like a CEO
Well,
does.
my understanding is he does the deal. Like he'll get the empty land and hires the contractor, and then boom, there's a building built, and then he sells his name for other people doing that.
Oh, okay,
So
yeah,
I think he's
but that's
kind of
just
in the
real
construction
estate.
business. So like when he says the wall's going to be built, I don't think he'd kick all the Mexicans out. I don't think he really cares. But when he says he's going to build a wall, you can bet there's going to build a damn wall because that's the business he's
He's
from.
building.
Yeah, oh yeah, he would for sure.
So
For
he
sure.
could give that to his friends and even back to himself, you know. So that's going to happen.
I'm not even opposed to it. I'm not sure what the big deal is with building a wall. We already have a wall in
Oh,
place.
it's
It's
just
just
silly.
not very effective. It's not very good.
Yeah, it's just silly.
We wouldn't have to worry
I don't
about.
think it's silly because it would curb the flow, right?
Whatever. There's
It's
other ways to address that
the
stuff.
drug war is the cause of
How?
all this.
I'm
I don't
curious.
know why I care. I don't care if people move from Texas to California, right? And they're just as annoying, more annoying, and yes, less useful than the Mexicans coming up. So I don't really care. Why can't they come up here and get jobs? Why can't I go down there and get a job?
Anybody. So we should just have open
Yeah,
borders. Period. Just let
absolutely.
all the
Yeah, well,
all.
if there's a job in Denmark, why couldn't I just fly over to Denmark and do it? Why's it got to be a bunch of freaking paperwork and moronic protectionism?
Right.
What was the point of that again? Because I can talk to the people over there pretty easy. I don't really see the point. And I don't think it's protection.
I don't think it's a problem with having
If
skilled
you're
labor
confident,
or
if you're
qualified
confident,
people coming in and taking jobs. It's the problem is that you have all these unsophisticated, uneducated people, some
Well,
people with criminal history, right,
part of
who
my
are
bias is that
criminals,
they
right,
can't do
who
my
are
job.
flooding over the border. It's
Well,
not.
part of my bias is they can't do my job, Vic, and they can't use
right.
yours
That's
either.
why I agree. The people standing outside my hotspot down here, the Mexicans that stand outside my hotspot, they're not the people who are doing the, figure out how to strap a house to the top of a mountain with granite and all this stuff. You know what I mean? They're doing the jobs that nobody else wants to do.
Well,
Why would I get in the way of that?
Well, the other piece to that too is, especially when you talk about criminals coming into this country, I mean, you have to ask yourself, if you are a drug lord or whatever, human sex trafficking or whatever it is that you do, right? Would you rather operate in Mexico with the Mexican law enforcement, or would you rather try and operate in the United States with U.S.
Well,
law
that's the
enforcement?
whole deal. We have to
What?
address the drug war issue
But that's
because
my point is if the
I don't
criminal,
understand. They operate in both places.
well,
Wherever
they do, but I mean, why would you want to come to a country where clearly they have a more organized law enforcement, right? I would think you would want to stay in Mexico and operate from there,
Well, I mean,
I
I
mean,
guess
there
it
is a big
depends on.
problem with the whole organized drug thing all across America, even in my area. I mean, it really is really bad.
I mean, it's not. I mean, we're talking about infrastructure here, right? Like, imagine if these criminals, right, they have children and they want a better lives for their children, right? So they're going to want to go to a place that has better infrastructure, better schooling, better whatever. So that would be one motive to
Although
want to
our
come into the United
So, but
States,
Vic, you
not
know,
stay
right,
in
that
Mexico.
for a long time the United States had no immigration restrictions whatsoever, right? They could just come here
right.
for like 100 years
In
until the
fact,
Chinese
it's not
Exclusion
Indian
Act.
or immigrant.
The Chinese Exclusion Act was the first restriction, and that was basically because the Chinese were better workers than the other immigrants and than the European immigrants, and that's
Yeah,
like
but
George
back
Hearst.
then I think there were probably more jobs available for that type of work. There was a lot of infrastructure that needed to be done
Took
100
education.
years ago.
Well, that we
Whereas these
know that.
days, I
Wait,
mean, if
wait.
we
So
were taking all the
these guys are
aristocrats from
coming up.
Mexico, I don't think anybody would have a problem with that. It's that,
But these guys are coming up to do jobs that are available.
Right. These are jobs that nobody wants to do. They're the picking of the vegetables and
But I don't even care if they do want to do them. That we get
is
HBO.
there really an overwhelming number of jobs available for that?
yeah, there is.
Well, it's not just that, right? But it's not
And
just that. I was just telling you about programming jobs. I don't see why I can't do a 6-month contract in India or something. And I don't mind if Indian programmers want to do it. I'm willing to compete on the playing field of my skills are unique to me. And
Yeah. Well, I think,
I've done construction cleanup before. Okay, I was a house cleaner for 20 years. I owned a business, and I would go up to these mountainous, they had caves underneath them, houses. I mean, just crazy big houses and clean them. And I've done even the lower level stuff. And if you really want a job, there is always something for somebody to clean, to do, to pick
Okay.
up.
Well, let's say that let's say what you do is you're allowed to come in, but before that happens, you need to broker some sort of deal with some sort of employer so that we know that you're not going to just be some homeless person or doing something like stealing in order to make ends meet so you can still survive in this country, without a home. So maybe that would be a little more reasonable. Because at least with you, Piero, you would have the arrangement with the employer. You'd be going over there. Obviously, you would have a place to stay. I would assume you'd be making enough money to have a place to stay. You wouldn't just be, being a vagabond and
You have to research.
doing who knows what.
Well, I don't know who said it, Vic. I don't know if it was you or if it was Piro that said it earlier. But there's a point there too, is that we don't do this at a state level. Nobody. I'm in Tennessee at the moment. Okay. Anybody from North Carolina, right? Well, there you go. If somebody is unemployed and is living on the street and is a criminal, They can come over and live in Tennessee, and nobody
Yeah,
bats an eye.
but do we want to compound the issue?
Well, it's not. I don't know that it really is.
Do we want to
Well, I don't think
pile
we are
on?
compounding. I mean, can you imagine the Mexicans are coming up here to be
There has to. Let's
Vic,
agree. Let's agree that there's
are
a
you
limit
saying
here.
Mexicans would
Clearly
come
you
up here to
guys
be
aren't.
homeless?
Hold on. Clearly, you guys aren't suggesting that we should take all the Ethiopians living in squalor, all the Mexicans.
Yes.
Like everybody from around the
I
world.
believe we should have totally open
I
borders,
think
just like we founded
So
this
then
country on.
just destroy this country, basically.
It wouldn't destroy. That's how this country
That's
got
the point.
built, my friend. There's a lot of empty space still.
I tend to
That's how you
kind
build
of,
things.
Just
That's how
fill
you
it.
build
Just
new infrastructure.
I think we're already overpopulated.
hang on.
Too many
Yeah, well, you're an
things.
old school European type thinking person. I'm an American. I believe in
here's
immigrants.
one of the problems that I don't quite understand, and that when you talk about building a fence to keep illegal immigrants out from Mexico, okay, I'm assuming, and I might be wrong here, but I'm assuming most of these people, not all, but most of these people that are jumping the fence are not criminals. They're trying to get a better life for themselves, and they're living in an area where they're likely to get their head or their kid's head blown off any day of the week. All right. Why can't we, instead of putting a fence up and forcing them to live under those conditions while we fucking process paperwork, why can't we at the very least provide a place inside the United States for them to temporarily move to while that paperwork is processed so that they are at least safe?
So we have to build this with taxpayer dollars.
Yes,
Out of charity.
Yes. Oh God, let's not have any charity.
not if
As if taxes aren't already high enough, as if the government doesn't already take a shitload of money from us. We want to add that. We want to create even
a lot of money.
higher taxes to
No.
accommodate people
No,
in
Vic,
Mexico.
Vic,
in a totally
My
different
alternate
country.
is that we just don't spend.
So why don't we just
$1
raise
billion on
taxes
Iraq.
even more to accommodate the
I
Ethiopians
don't
and
think- I
the
think-
people from Zimbabwe?
Well, I
And
hate to
That's
say
the
it, but
only
I
way to do
think
it.
I
Vic,
think
that's not the only way to do it. You know it.
I think nationalism is ultimately going away. It's going to have to. I
Your
think
taxes end up going to wars and getting lost, and there's
You know,
all
Vic,
kinds
why is it so easy to attack Iraq, for this country to spend $1 trillion on a 10-year project to bomb Iraq, but you're going to say, oh, but we can't raise that. Well, how about we just stop spending
I'm not
$1
in
trillion on
favor.
that?
I've said it in here before. I've said one of the biggest wastes of taxpayer money
Yeah, well, building a
is
compound,
the ridiculous amount of money that we spend on defense, right,
building
in
a
the military.
compound that houses 20,000 people is a really useful thing to have. It doesn't
right, and
cost
it's
that
not
much
going
money.
to affect.
So I
We
don't
have
really
homeless people. Why don't
tell
we
me we're
use
gonna
that
increase our taxes.
housing? Why don't we use that housing to deal with the homeless people that we
Well, what do you
already
think
have
I
in
think
this
about that?
country?
I think.
What do you think I think
Let me
about
hold on.
that?
I don't think it's
I'm just
valid.
saying, don't you think we should deal with our own problems before we start trying to
Well,
fix
but
everybody
the issue-
else's
yeah, but
problems?
No,
the
not
issue-
necessarily before. We should deal with all of them, whichever one I can get people
think
to deal with
Then
first.
you're spreading yourself. You're spreading yourself out too thin. You're never going to get shit accomplished.
Right, but what you're saying is, but Daryl, what you're saying on the other side of that coin is you're saying that because we can't address every single problem, we shouldn't address anything. And that's not right either. I think we're not, when you're talking about people that are homeless in the United States, they're in the United States. They're citizens. That's not the issue we're even talking about. We're talking about people who live in another country who want to make a better life here, but the reason that they're crossing the border illegally is because every day they stay where they are, they're likely to get killed.
Homeless people in this country want a better life for themselves as well, right?
I
They
don't
want
disagree.
To help them,
shelters
right?
and stuff for them.
But you don't necessarily want to help them either. There's another reason not to help them, and it
No,
goes.
I'm just saying that if you're going to go the extra mile, raise taxes and all this stuff to create housing, all these projects for
I didn't
for
say raise
homeless
taxes.
people
Maybe
and
that's your
stuff.
position.
Oh well, whatever.
And
I mean,
Well, I'm for
if you're whatever
no, it's not
resources
whatever.
we get, whether
It's not
listen.
I am for changing
What?
the way.
Yes,
No.
cutting.
I am for changing the way we spend money right now.
I got it, and
not
so
raising.
am I.
Yes,
I
just
got
stop
it.
saying I want to raise taxes.
Oh my God.
Well, don't say that I want to change taxes. It's a
It
stereotype.
doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Okay. The point is, wherever we get the resources from, those resources should be funneled towards existing problems here in this country, right?
I don't know why. Do you think you care more about a homeless person in Chicago than a homeless person in Jakarta? Do you think? Because I think that how much you care about both of them is pretty similar.
Yeah. Just logistically, it makes
Why?
sense.
Why?
It makes sense
Yeah,
because you're just importing extra problems. It
So
doesn't
what do you
make
want
any
to do
sense.
about those homeless
It's
people
like-
in
it's like-
Chicago?
It's like, okay,
What do
you're
you
a
want to do
programmer,
then?
so
What
you
is
would
your what is the okay? So you have a plan then for the Chicago ones that wouldn't work in Jakarta. It's kind of far away logistically. What is the plan then that we should do to for the ones that are here?
Chicago better. To make Chicago
Because
better.
I'm like, let's not do anything but just make the economy better. And one way we can do that is allowing immigration, and a lot of things can get done that way.
Because they
I
work
think what
more
ends
and
up happening is when you actually import poverty and unsophisticated people, right? What ends up happening is the crime rate goes up.
Like
Then
in America, that didn't happen.
I mean, it's a bad thing, right?
Well,
It
but I
it
don't think it's a bad
wrecks
thing.
it
And we are a
wrecks
country. Look, we're the
that
one country in
society.
the world that proves that it was a good thing. Everybody said it was a bad thing. We tried it was a good thing, and now, oh, it's a bad thing again? I don't think so. I believe we proved it's a good thing.
It gets to a point, yeah, when it's like completely there's not a very large population. It doesn't really matter. There's plenty of
I don't know
space.
what
But
you're
I
talking
think
about. There's
You wanna
nothing
get
but
into the
empty
whole-
space in this country still. That you can drive 7 hours and before you hit the next town in this country. What are you talking about?
It's not
who's
like
going to build that housing though? It has
The
somebody
immigrants,
has
the immigrants,
the
my
immigrant
friend,
is going
they'll
to
build
build
any.
its his own house.
Yeah,
Well,
they'll
this
build
has to be
anything.
arranged. You can't just assume it.
So let's arrange it.
Oh, well, okay, fine. But that's what that's what legal immigration is all about. You set up, you negotiate this, and then they come in legally. They don't just pour
No,
over the border.
legal immigration interferes with this because when that wasn't an issue, when they had
Well,
to
okay,
get people,
whatever. Then then reform.
when they had to get workers in Hawaii from Portugal and the Philippines, they could get as many. It's scaled as quickly as they needed it to scale. But if you have some sort of HB1 visa, you got limits. Then you can only get 20 of them. Oh, we can't get 20 until next year. No, that's not as convenient for the businesses when you're importing labor to build roads and as much as you're not going to have a boom economy on highly regulated immigration labor. It's got to be
You think
open.
this would actually help the economy?
Well,
This
it
would
helped the
help the
United States
economy.
when it was the case. That's when our economy grew the most.
and technically
history.
they're
It's hard
all
to imagine if this would actually work.
Well, do you know European countries that have dropping populations? You know about the
I mean,
problem.
if this was the case, then if this was proven, then why isn't every country just opening the borders? And I mean, why is like Angela Merkel right now?
Because the common sense solution says otherwise. People don't think so anyway.
I think
They
it's a
don't
little
care
more
anyway.
than just yeah, it is common sense, but I think
And
it's also probably
actually, you know what?
statistically proven
The UK would
that
have a dropping
poverty yields crime, and
Yeah.
and these people procreate, right? Unfortunately, they create
Yeah,
more
but there's other
kids than affluent.
But there's other issues. Like, see, when you have a dropping population, this creates situations of deflation and all kinds of problems. You have to have a growth economy. Under capitalism, you need to keep growing your population. And then we on the Western nations, let me finish this, Athena. Let me finish. So we need growth. That is definitely for sure true. You need a growing population and a growing younger population. So if we are going to balance out and we don't have growing populations because now it's a modern world and we have 2 kids a family on average, then immigration is one way to supply that. And actually, even the countries where, like in the UK, this is a known thing that thank gosh they have all of this immigration because it's providing support.
No, I'm not against immigration. Like you said, I mean, this country is built on immigrants. What I'm saying is that it needs to be orderly. It needs to be done through the immigration process, the legal immigration process.
Well, I agree with
Not
that. It's just that
just
I agree with that, but I think that should amount to coming to the border and signing up.
Right.
Putting your
That's
thumbprint,
Not
your
that
thumbprint,
hard.
your iris print, your
we don't have to
thumbprint,
know
your iris
what
print,
you're gonna
your
do. Like,
identification.
I don't know.
Why would we have to know?
I don't know
Well,
what
how
the current
how
I
much
don't
are
know
you
what
gonna
the current process is like, but I would hope that it has some sort of like condition in place
Yeah,
where the
make sure
person
they're a
already
good
has a
person
place to
because all the
live.
Americans,
And
Yeah,
see,
background, yes, a criminal history
right?
check.
Because all of Americans are that.
Athena, you
I mean,
internal.
to be an American, that's the kind of person you have to be, right? We know all Americans are that way, so they should be up to our standards. Or how about we just use our real standards? And you just have to be a person.
Athena, you really need to learn how to take turns, dude.
Well, I'm trying to get my actual.
Just like put your hand up or something, and like when we're done speaking, then you can speak.
Okay, well, can I say something then?
Go ahead.
Okay. They are going to come in and they might be very dumb. They may have never had any education at all. But in my experience, most of them, their children end up going to school and becoming educated and are way smarter than they were. And none of that matters that they were dumb or that they didn't, whatever, because they're doing the right things. They're getting their children into education. And then those children become, you know, more likely
Where do you get this idea that these children become like these extremely productive members of society? I think they add to the poverty problem. I think they and I think it's more likely than not that they'll end up being stuck in in the poor class, right?
No,
Which is a problem.
That's not how it works.
It just increases the. I don't know what the solution is. I mean, obviously, I wish. Athena, you're doing it again. Obviously, I sympathize. I understand where you're coming from. I understand that it would be nice if we could just help everybody. There shouldn't be this nationalistic attitude where we only care about our own. We don't care about other countries. But when you're being pragmatic about it, it really does have to be done that way. Otherwise, you end up wrecking every country, right?
You're neglecting the fact that from my experience now, I've lived in Georgia, Florida, North Carolina. I've lived in Texas for a little while. Okay, I went to school with a lot of immigrant children, and they were almost always like in the upper, 70 and higher percent. They were way motivated to become smarter and to get real jobs. That's just real. The people that I went to school with and the people that I've worked with through cleaning businesses for years, they may not be that smart, but their children and the people that I went to school with that were in
that seems very anecdotal. I don't think that evidence
real.
would actually
that's just real.
show that that's actually true in the general case. Because I mean, it's hard to imagine. I mean, why? Why would a poor person here be less motivated than a poor person coming from Mexico? Like a kid, like I don't know. I don't see the link.
They eat, and whenever
yeah, but poor people here are motivated by the same thing, right? And yet you're saying that these immigrants are somehow the children of these immigrants are somehow more motivated.
They are. And
I don't, yeah, and that may be true. I don't necessarily accept it at face value what you're saying because I just don't see the link there. I don't.
And it has to do with what the education is like in your area. In my area, our education is really good, and in the high
I think to me, when a kid excels, it has more to do with proper parenting, good teachers, obviously. That sort of thing. It's proper values.
Totally improper parenting. But anyway.
Well, there are outliers, of course. It's not a hard and fast rule. But in general, good parenting helps, right? You would agree.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think that here's the thing I wanted to go through, which is you're picturing that an open border would lead to criminals coming in. It's like, well, to some degree, of course, if more people came in, statistically, but let's just think of it like right now. If you're trying to, if the criminals are not very smart, the common criminals smart or motivated. They're being lazy. That's why they're robbing someone down the street. Everybody's going to learn.
I'm not so much concerned about the criminals
the people that move
in.
from one continent to another. It's not statistically going to be a higher number of the criminals. The criminals are looking for an easy way. That's not easy.
Hold on. My concern is not so much that the criminals coming in. Of course, that will happen. But my concern is that the poverty that this will inevitably increase that will lead to more crime, because we know that poverty is a problem, right? We know that poverty does lead to crime.
The thing is, these people, the only reason there'd be poverty is if there's not gainful work.
And they work.
The purpose is to grow the economy.
I mean, come on. Look,
you have to coordinate with I'm not saying open the borders and then give money away. I'm saying open the borders and run an economy like you normally do.
If people can't even make a living wage working at McDonald's, what makes you think they're going to make a living wage?
Well, I'm not a big fan in expanding our.
First of all, they'll lower their living conditions. They will live on less. They do live on less. And then what they
Just about
really
anybody
want
can do
for their
construction.
children, what they really want for their children is for them to get educated in an American school. And whenever they get education, those children are very motivated, and that's just true.
I don't know. I just have this. I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe opening up the borders and just say, "Come on in," wouldn't lead to epic economic disaster. Maybe you're right. I don't know, but my
Well, they
gut
probably,
instinct.
I mean, do you think you're in my job? You run a website, right? And I'm a software engineer.
Yes.
I'm not worried.
Right.
About
I
what
would
now?
help that would hurt my profession at all. It would help. I mean, I would
No,
like
but
to be able
I
to
would
work
be
internationally
concerned.
easily, and I would probably hire the people internationally because it's so expensive. Yes, I would hire people to work from home in Chile. You
And
know,
I
Well,
know
we are affected by the economy, though, right?
yeah. I just don't see how cheap labor ever ruins the economy. Now, if they're all criminals, sure, that's the part I just don't think that that would happen. That's not the main issue. And, of course, it would only work if you have a growth economy again.
And of
You know,
course,
to
the
grow.
people in this country
Build
who
new
are
cities.
the people in this country who are currently unemployed, who are competing for these jobs, right? They would probably be annoyed that now they have to compete with these
so
immigrants.
Do you
Um,
think they're not
now,
competing for the jobs the
now, of
immigrants do
course, you would
now?
say, oh, well, no, that's not. They're not competing for the same jobs because these guys are only looking to
I also don't
pick
care if they're
cotton.
competing
And
for the same job. So why can't they get the same job? I don't get it. What's the problem with that? I believe in minimum wage. I don't understand. Why can't they get the same job? That's
they
their
get
problem.
I
You're saying
suppose
that's their
that
problem.
that's that
I don't like a
nationalistic
person that
bias that
can't
I
get
have.
a job more just because I don't really mind a person that can't
I
do that. I
don't know,
feel sympathy,
Harold.
but I don't like them more just because they're American in that situation as opposed to
I will
British.
I will admit that there is a bit of a nationalistic. It's not just a nationalistic bias. It's like, don't you care more about your home than, say, the home down the street, or your
Yeah,
community versus the community? I mean, yeah, you do, right?
but
So
you
it kind
caring
of
about
makes sense to
California,
care.
but you caring about California more than Vancouver, that stops making much sense. Why? That's pretty arbitrary.
okay.
You know, I understand why New England. I love New England, and I'm falling in love with
I
it. So it's
understand. No,
like,
I understand.
hey,
I've
you know, I
actually
love
made
New
similar
England,
arguments in the past. I've
but I
actually
don't have to
asked
love
myself.
Florida because of that. But I love Florida too. But you know what? I love, you know, Cancun as well. I haven't even been there. You know what I mean? It's like I have enough of that kind of sympathy to go around the
I
whole world.
understand what you're saying, and I've asked myself, Athena, my goodness. Go ahead,
That's
Athena.
okay,
Go ahead.
Athena.
Don't ever
Go ahead.
stop. So it is
Go
really
ahead. Go ahead.
okay. Okay,
So
I've read a
nice.
lot of science fiction, and growth economy is what you have to stay on in order for things to actually work when you got a lot of people on the earth, you know? And so we got tons of land, all these people, all this, whatever. If they're motivated, let it happen. You know? That's just my opinion.
Yeah,
Growth,
well, and I actually believe there's another kind of economic model we could move to, but it's certainly clear that that's a theory, and the one we have right now is based on population growth in an age where we've stopped having population growth in the West. So I think the current solution is pretty practical, and
I
yeah,
have asked myself in the past, like, about this question is like, why do we have borders? Why do we have this concept of nations and stuff? Why don't we have one world government? Because it seems like, we're all one people, right? We're all human. There
even
shouldn't be that, like, we should, like, people here in America are more valuable than, say, the Ethiopians. Like, we equally suffer, we should care equally. So then I ask myself that question sometimes, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't really have a good
yeah.
answer. I don't know. Maybe there is. I'm not an economist, but I guess my gut instinct tells me that if you try to, like, open the border and you spread yourself really thin like that, it's going to create a lot of havoc.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One, I mean, as somebody that has thought that through and decided we don't need borders, well, we do need borders to check for, pests and tuberculosis and submit to a medical exam, and so there's some, of that. But so there is some obvious purpose, for borders, and also I admit that, if you just open borders, it might be something you can't do suddenly. It might be too big of a shock to the system. On the other hand, I just think that it's become so easy to go everywhere in the world that it becomes inevitable that, we have to have a common way to just freely move back and forth. But I acknowledge your hesitancy as well. I used to have that kind of feeling, but I decided it was just nationalism.
And you have to
And I
become
love my nation still.
I don't know
I
if
love my
it's
nation
more.
still.
It's not so much that. It's like I'm afraid of the ramifications because it's like I live in a pretty nice neighborhood, right? So just use as an analogy. Let's imagine this was my whole country, and if I suddenly see that this nice neighborhood is turned to shit because there are like
then you get out and
these slums being erected and stuff all around me, and it's like, oh great, now I'm surrounded by people living in squalor and it's like homeless people and shit and there's like graffiti
you
everywhere.
got
And
to
it's like,
solve.
oh my goodness, this is a step backward, right? Now,
Right. So the thing is, okay, there's so many things I could say about that, but I think let's say the most positive one. The thing is that, it's just how do we imagine that everybody would come here? I mean, really, if all the world's borders were open, we would not. We're not famous. We're famous for economic opportunity. We're not famous for social support. I mean, historically, people would flood into Europe. It might be a thing that helps you mitigate your social services so they don't get too crazy. I mean, you should not have social services that are really, really giving because you figure those are Americans that are at heart good. You shouldn't have a social service system you wouldn't give to a stranger. You're giving away too much at that point. You know what I mean? So it might mitigate, because if you had open borders, then you would have to think twice about the kind of social services that were automatically available. And frankly, you understand, I don't believe in giving away as much funding and subsidizing the rent. I believe we should have a jobs program where if you want to work for a day, you could get paid for a day. And in a system like that, anybody taking advantage of that would, some people, might manage to screw that system over, but pretty much you could guarantee you got, a day's worth of trash picked up or a day's worth of cement, laid or whatever. So, I think that would be a good thing, that maybe you couldn't just have some, when they're creating their social systems in Europe, they're thinking about the good German Volk and what they wanted to do to the poor folks that just didn't happen to make it in that economy. And maybe that's too familial. They should be making a social system that they would give to a refugee or an immigrant or anybody that's minimal,
well, I mean, I guess the other problem.
Planetary. I mean, we could talk to people all the way across the planet on the internet now, and we see that we have common ground no matter which country we come from. And so why can't we just get ahead on trying to make this a planet? We do
Well,
have for
I'll explain. I think here's another reason why, Ahina. I
but
think here's the problem. All right. The thing is that not everybody is the same, right? We are human, right? But there are different cultures. There are different attitudes, different languages, right? And when you invite it all in, you might not have people, who are multiculturalists might not have a problem with that, right? But there are people who don't feel comfortable being surrounded by, you know, uh, all these different.
Yeah, but as a multiculturalist, I think I get to say that, my country of the United States is the multicultural. That's the only reason it could even exist.
we're all in.
But we kind of like self-segregate in this country, don't we?
Well, we've started in the
But
last
if
100
we open the floodgates and everybody starts pouring in, then these little communities that we already have where we self-segregate, they're going to become smaller and smaller and smaller because people are going to start pouring in, and I don't know.
And there's places you can go. I mean, for instance, where I live, you drive up to the top of the mountain, and there's all kinds of country clubs and this.
Yeah, but
And
that's because we have
What
this
about
space, right? But if we suddenly allow, like, everybody from the Middle East, everybody from Africa, to pour into this
that's not
country,
what I'm saying.
there isn't going to be very much.
You know what, Vic? Vic, what the difference is that I think I'm like capitalist enough that all of those people flooding in, to me, that's like a bunch of gold nuggets deciding to come to your country. They are all worth more value in production than they cost. You are going to be able to put them to productive uses. So that's part of just the difference in the visualization. Is to me was always an economic opportunity. Letting the Chinese come over here, they're the ones that were able to finish the the coast to coast railroad. So stopping them from
Yeah, but
coming in
those
cost us
jobs are
money.
becoming
It doesn't affect
more and more scarce, right? I mean, we don't really.
But we don't have to think in those stereotypes, right? Because like India right now, people can hire programmers for $30 an hour, and uh, and that's just a fact of life. And I embrace that, and I can compete with those guys because while I can't offer my service for $30 an hour, I'm 3 or 4 times faster and more expert, and I just have a different market. If you want code that isn't going to work well and you're going to write it 5 times, then by all means, I'm happy to do that. And the odd thing is that I started working with outsourcing companies. I'm working with the company right now that is based in India, but they also enabled me in Maine to work for a California company because they've got the, outsourcing thing, sales pitch down. And so they actually helped me compete without having to move to the city. So, I think it's a positive thing, and partly it's if you can compete and how many freebies you're giving away, and I am conservative enough that I believe in a social safety net that really is more like a net. Like you fall in it and you crawl out of it. It doesn't push,
Right.
it's not doing things for you. It makes sure that there's gainful work because I do believe that's in everybody's best interest
Right.
to guarantee that there's a day's work to do and there's a lot of things that need to get done. And if you choose what gets done, you increase value. When you choose properly, if you give $50 for somebody to spend a day's labor, there's $100 value out of it, and it's not rocket science to choose useful things, right? So, I mean, there's potholes that need to be filled in, there's bridges that need to be rebuilt. So, I just think, I think it would,
I know what you're saying. I'm just
Yeah.
like, to me,
I get where you're
I
at
guess
with
I
it.
guess it's to me. I guess I'm coming from a standpoint of fear. Like I just don't know.
That's the
It,
problem.
it would be it would. I don't know what would happen, and I don't think any of us know, to be honest. I know you guys have your ideas that this would be some like multicultural utopia, that's what it would be turn
Well, it
into.
already
I'm
is.
not so confident that it would turn into that.
America is the closest thing to a multicultural utopia that's been known yet. I mean, look, people say there's going to be a race war. There's not going to be a race war. We had the tensions, even with all this Ferguson stuff going on now, the tensions we have is nothing like dealing with the neo-Nazi and 1,000-year-old hate in Europe.
Well,
This is a multicultural utopia.
well,
Our
I'll tell you right
For
now.
one thing, our immigrant communities have all learned English until recently. There's maybe an issue, whereas, they did the separate but equal thing in Europe. And that definitely doesn't work. That version of multiculturalism, you got to have a melting pot or something,
I mean,
salad or whatever.
I'll tell you right now that I definitely don't want, like, I think for instance, Muslims have integrated into the United States much better than they have, say, in Britain. In Britain,
Yeah, that's an
I mean,
interesting point. Okay,
there
yeah,
are
I think you're right.
radicals, right? And I wouldn't want that type of that element, or like even some of the Africans who have these crazy religious ideologies, right? The Christians who are fucking they're witches and shit, and they're burning children alive and shit. I don't want that shit flooding into this country. I don't. I'm glad that that's like, across an entire ocean over there.
But I don't think they'd want to come over here necessarily.
Yeah, I think there's way less.
That's the anti-flood thing, is that you'd be surprised how much the water stays where it is when you remove the walls.
Okay.
Yeah.
We would definitely get a lot of Mexican immigration, but that would be good.
But are you sure that that's
and the criminals
because
already
we have?
have.
But are you sure that that's not simply because we have these policies in place, that we don't have open borders? Maybe if we did open the borders completely, that these people would flood into this country. I mean, think about Al Qaeda and stuff. I mean, they and ISIS. They would flood. They would love it. Oh, right, great. This is one less obstacle for us to overcome.
I don't know. I
pour right in there.
No, I think not, because that's a harder one to say, because everybody could say they're ISIS. But let's say it was a Mexican drug thing. I mean, the Mexican drug people, if you have a little bit of money, the way you illegal immigrate's easy. You come as a tourist on a tourist visa, and then you disappear and don't go home. So that's how criminals and anybody with a nefarious business interest, and I would think including Al Qaeda, but I think also you have radical youth that don't have money, aren't necessarily hooked up, nobody's going to pay for a ticket, maybe they have some minor crimes, it's too late for them to get in because they won't get a clear visa to get in. But you know, and so maybe not with the ISIS, because that's a weird thing where everybody gets to say, I'm a terrorist, you know, I'm an ISIS, I'm a CRIP. You know, it's like whether you are or not, you are, because that's what you're working on. That those people might be able to come in, but then again, they're across oceans and stuff, so coming in by foot, they will have to get some money together for a boat or a plane. So I think really you would definitely have some flooding. Um, and I think you would have some economic loss to where, you know, maybe if I could work really easily in Montreal, it's just, well, it's like 6 hours away, but let's say it was, if I could really work, you know, some American companies might lose first dibs on my labor, is what I'm saying. So actually, as a programmer, it's the easiest probably of any profession to work anywhere in the world that you want.
Mhm.
You know, more companies that will get you the visa and do the $1,000 of this or that. So, but there would be more of that, right? You'd have people from America actually going up and working, or, you know, people like okay, I'm being confusing, but for example, Canada has kind of taken over a lot of the main infrastructure. Our power companies and stuff got bought by Canadian companies, and so things like that will just be easier. Me to work for a Canadian company as an American citizen, and sort of there's resource draw to that, like a brain drain equivalence of, you know, I think you would increase those things. I just think it would probably balance out. And you know, I don't criticize you. You're honest enough to say, well, it's kind of a fear. I wouldn't. It doesn't even sound like a fear. I would say just a concern. And maybe I have too little concern about that, because I have to admit that if there was a problem, I think it would be temporary, and I would
Mm-hmm.
just, I would look forward to the steady state, and I would say, well, however it settles out, that's how it should have been all along, and we try to make it as smooth on the way.
Well, no, it's
Because
definitely more than just a
America is
concern
so
for me.
big. America
Oh,
is
really?
so big. All these little fears, these people would have to research exactly where they're going to go and what they're going to do if they're actually coming in for nefarious reasons. And so you see it
I
as
see.
more of like a temporary problem. You take care
Wait,
of each little problem.
well,
The
Vic, you
reason
were
it's
like
more of
talking
a
about
concern
your
for me,
neighborhood dying and being full of
well, no,
graffiti.
it's more
I
than
thought
that.
that
It's
was
if we,
hyperbolic.
the nice thing about having borders is that at least I have the comfort, that peace of mind to know that there's at least something in place to do a background check on people who are coming into this country
No, I agree with that.
and that sort of thing, right? But
I
if we
believe in that.
open the floodgates and just everybody's free to come in and they can settle wherever the fuck they want, and Jesus,
Okay,
like
well, let me
I would be
clarify a little
afraid.
bit. Let me clarify a little bit. I tried to clarify. Like I said, there has to be a place that stops, and they can actually be somewhat invasive. They can give you a medical test for tuberculosis. They can say no vegetables because there might be a med fly in it. So there's a lot of stuff that they can do, and they can
Where do
definitely
we
do a
establish
criminal.
those borders, though? Well, like I'm
The
trying to
same
understand. I'm
places
not.
they are now, you know, for the
But
same
why?
kind of.
Why doesn't that seem arbitrary? I'm not disagreeing. I'm just asking the
Okay,
question. Like,
well, for example, in
how
the
do
case
we?
of California, I'm from California, so my whole life we had a kind of immigration thing. Even between states, they will not let you bring produce into California. You come across the border from Nevada and you go through the gate and you have to, do you have any oranges? You know, and they won't let you bring them in because of medfly,
Okay.
right? Okay,
So
so that kind of thing is obviously legit. And maybe they didn't need to do that with the medfly. Whatever. Let the scientists decide. We do whatever we think is best, and then we'll change it, right? If we figure out a better way to fight the medfly, fine. But for right now, everybody just submit, give your freaking oranges. And so I support that kind of thing. And I think that you can, and where does it go? Well, they're worried about the medfly and investing the San Joaquin Valley and the, you know, so it happens at the California border, but that's at the top of the mountains, like coming from Nevada, that's in the Sierra Mountains. And so like the next stop would be the valley. So it's a geographical thing, but I'm okay with there being a historical, this is where we drew the line, and that becomes a membrane that you can check. And at the national borders, I would preserve those as a more than state borders where you also do extra criminal checks and things like this. And it would be legal to have restrictions on criminals. I mean, obviously, if you're in probation or something, you can't move. But maybe after probation, there's a period of
yeah.
you can't move, or you have to
You're in
report where you are.
favor. You are in favor of
Of
creating borders.
membranes. Yeah, no,
Um,
I just think that if you, let's say, yeah, exactly. So all I'm really saying is like, I have no criminal record and I'm a Mexican and I want to move to Detroit. Okay, you're going to spend 3 hours here and filling out a lot of paperwork
yeah, but
and
how
then doing
often,
an
right?
oath.
You're not going to do that every single time they want to cross that border, right?
Well, like for
No,
instance,
no, because if they had a passport, it would have been done ahead of time. I mean, the passport would have ahead of time established who they are. We'd look it up, and boom, they're in 15 minutes. All right.
Right.
But what if they want to continually cross
Florida.
over that border like they need to?
You know what? I think what you're really raising that seems like a difficult question for me would be, wait, are they becoming citizens, or does it just not matter where you're a
Well, I
citizen
guess we
of?
would be
So where do they
removing.
pay?
No,
So where do
I
they pay
thought.
taxes, and where do they stuff like that? And I would say no, they become citizens if they're here. I would say you still make a distinction between tourism, visiting family, extended tourism, and moving somewhere. To a certain degree, you trust the person, but
The
also there's time
idea that
limits.
I was entertaining was the idea of just getting rid of nations and borders completely.
That
That's what I was referring to,
No, but I'm
like as a
saying
thought
when you go
experiment.
to Nevada, when you
How
are
would that
from
work
Nevada,
out?
well, I'm saying I would never get to that point. When you're in Nevada and California, you can't get any more similar, or who cares which place you're. But you have to go through this membrane and give them your vegetables,
and can I
right?
say
If you
something?
wanted to go from Mexico City to Detroit, you would be going through some major borders with a lot of, do you have vegetables? And I'm sorry, we're going to have to run your passport for a criminal record at this one. And oh, now we're looking for stolen tomatoes, and the border is a place
I
the
guess
cops are
what
allowed to profile.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Well,
guess what I'm just, go ahead,
I want to
Athena.
say, like, for instance, with Florida,
Phone is standing
when
back.
you go into Florida, you have to sign a document saying that you become a citizen of Florida because they want their state taxes. As soon as you walk in the door, they want you to start making them state taxes. And when I moved to Florida, I had to sign a document saying that I wanted to live there immediately in order to get a job, you know?
Yeah, I think all of those kind of issues, or like there's what is it, Rhode Island or somebody doesn't have sales tax, so people would go and buy cars there, and now they've got it where, oh, you have to pay the taxes in the state that you register. And there's always going to be issues like that, and fair enough. One place doesn't have sales tax and another state says, yeah, but we don't want to. You're running that, the sales tax of the car pays for the roads. You're using our roads, we're going to get you anyway. I don't see getting rid of that kind of stuff, right or wrong. It is, the politics leads to what it is at the moment, and so that kind of structure you still have. It's
What
just a matter of, if you want to move and you're an honest person, never been convicted of a crime, move wherever you want. That's
And the
what
humanitarian part is not involved in that. The stuff that we're talking about, this little stuff, is not the actual humanitarian. Is this person suffering or not, kind of thing.
Well,
You know,
the refugee issue is a totally different question. That's a very different question. On the other hand, remember, Vic, when you have refugees, it's everybody. So there's doctors and lawyers and the kids of doctors and lawyers, and they got the whole cross section in there. So, there are things you could. I think with refugees, it's a long way from where we are, but you actually could build refugee camps that were small cities with places for businesses, and there would be, the entrepreneurial people are among the refugees, and they would actually be entrepreneurs serving the needs of these refugees, and they would take care of themselves and actually produce money like any healthy city actually produces more than it needs. It creates value, right? It
yeah.
makes wealth.
I
And
guess
I think you
what
could
I
set
was
that up.
yeah, what I was, entertaining is like I was going beyond what you guys are talking about. Like I was not entertaining anarchism necessarily, but I was entertaining the idea of just
Oh, I see.
a borderless world where everybody's just seen as a human being, one world government, and I'm just trying to understand how that would work out without borders. Like, would that work? What would be the yeah, I don't know.
Well,
so
yeah,
It
I
far,
just
think it
seems
would
to
work.
me
No,
like it
no.
would just naturally turn into what it currently is. Like
Well, oh, interesting. Yeah.
because of cultural differences and that sort of thing, and it just I think it just
Well,
naturally.
yeah, in the sense that we had started a nation where there was no immigration law, and then we've become immigration paranoids. To me, not to be insulting, but you know what I mean. Yeah, so we would regress probably to a borderless society. You could only really imagine it if there really was a world government that was just the law of the land, and there was something like the Constitution that everybody got hip hip parade, and so it became an international religion, and people would stick with it. Because of nature, yeah, people start wanting to exclude, and they think they have a good thing going, and somebody comes in and is
Right,
changing that. You
right,
know,
and that's a
I don't
bad
really care
thing in
about
your
that.
opinion,
But
and that's consider that
but
a
my
bad
problem.
thing.
No, I think it's good that things are going to change anyway, so that they should just have to deal. But I am saying, though, if you did take away all the borders totally anarchistically, there is a problem. And I was talking about the medfly because I think the real problem is there's a public health issue. And if you let the med fly into California, you're hurting, like, they put out 25% of the international food market or whatever they used to, probably not anymore. But anyway, you would hurt a lot of people with that by ruining that resource. So that would be the cost. And you have now, and so to me that, and then also, okay, wait, we've got some tuberculosis or dengue fever. This is our opportunity to catch these cases that might be going from one area that we're having it to one area we're not. And if you didn't have the borders, you'd miss that opportunity. And then the final layer is, this is where it gets touchy for me, but it's the same for criminals. There's certain kinds of criminals, and criminals have a reason to flee, and it's also a place that you check criminals, which means it can be abused, and political people that are criminals just because, the political difference, there's abuse in making it a criminal thing. But I do believe in borders all the way up to filtering for criminals, and maybe certain people can't travel certain places, and if you, and so that's my answer.
But there's that thing again, filtering for criminals, right? So whether that person is a criminal here in this country along this arbitrary border, or a criminal in that country over there across that arbitrary border, it doesn't really matter, right? It's still, he's still going to hurting another individual. So from a moral standpoint, is there really a difference? Like, why do you need a border to screen it? Like, you should just screen it wherever it exists. Like,
well, that's the question. No, that's what I'm saying. I agree with that. I think that maybe there is an argument to say this person's in your society. He's not in the jail right now. He can do what he likes. He's on his third chance or his fifth chance or whatever. He's on one of his chances, and I agree with that. But then when you talk about germs and medfly, there's an argument to say, well, let's screen that for medical purposes. And I think there's a similarity with crimes that you can make an argument. But I agree. That's where I think the borders become weakest. I think the ultimate justification for borders is public health, and including agricultural health. And if crime somehow or other things can be argued into that, maybe it's a slippery slope. Maybe you should cut that stuff off. And I'm just saying that I think, I'm still a guy from this world, and I grew up with borders too, and I have some innate nationalism, and I'm just saying, I guess maybe I like keeping the United States border at a place where you would check if a guy was on probation for a crime before you let him into his, he's not even supposed to leave his county. Now he's crossing the border. I'm kind of like, let's check. So I guess I want to preserve the national border as a place where we don't let criminals wander around or something. But, I'm not confident in that because I've just argued against it.
I guess, the thing is, I'm like thinking, go ahead.
Okay, you have to look into how the states got their shapes in the first place. There's places where there's like a tighter vent into stuff. A lot of times it just seems like there's a big open space or whatever, but like in my area, it has to do with, how we ended up in this shape is because how the rivers are and how the mountains are shaped, and they didn't want disease, this kind of disease, getting into this side of the whatever, and when you look into how each of the borders got made, how this, there was a show called How the States Were Made, or the Shapes, or whatever, and it does make sense. It's for reasons that ended up being, well, it's easier to make a border here because we can tighten. There's one river you have to go over, and there's only 3 bridges, and there's, it's that kind of thing.
Well, really, I can't never understand the square states. I think it should always be geographical. I guess if you have the plains, you can start splitting them up by squares, and I guess that's kind of what they did. But it's kind of it's funny point actually that if we did loosen the borders, it would make sense to get rid of all the current borders and rebuild borders where it really made sense. Where there's deer on that side and not on that side, and maybe want to keep the deer on that side, and that's where we would draw our borders. It's like with ecological justifications. But
yeah, I mean, I haven't given this much thought. I mean, again, I kind of derailed the conversation because we were talking about immigration, and I just started brainstorming about this notion of one world government, and I started thinking, like, what are the disadvantages of one world government?
Well,
I think the reason we need borders is because if you're going to be allocated, if a government's going to be allocating resources, like, it needs to know which region needs more help, because not every region on the planet is going to need the same amount of resources and stuff. So you need to say, okay, this particular region needs this many
That's what
resources. It
I'm
needs
Right.
saying.
Another way of putting that is you're never going to get away with the need for jurisdictions. I mean, a cop needs to know where
oh
he's
yeah,
supposed to patrol. So,
right, right. So
Yeah.
you do need borders then,
well,
essentially.
I'm glad you brainstormed on it because I've thought about it a lot since, I was in my 20s, and it's part of my libertarian stance, and I think libertarians should support this. And yet you got me to think about it a little bit deeper about how, well, yeah, you'd probably want to change the borders for this reason, and is it, and what is the subtlety about checking people's criminal status or whatever. So anyway, I appreciate it, but
Yeah.
so, hey, we're gonna have to wrap this up. Pretty
All right.
soon.
Yeah. Next time I'd like to talk with you about your social justice warrior because I don't think we ever
Yeah.
fleshed that out completely. I don't think we ever
Good.
will.
Well,
But
maybe it's good we took a little break because that was going to be the topic this week. I'm glad we did. Circumcision. Thank you, Gary. And
I heard
other
a little bit of
topics.
that conversation. I'm still not sure what
He's
the big
evidently
argument.
pro circumcision, and he's.
I actually agreed with Gary, and to
Everybody's
be honest, I mean,
Yeah.
because the evidence seems to suggest that circumcision is actually beneficial for health reasons.
Some of the latest stuff
So-
has said that, but whatever.
Yeah, it's just not so beneficial that it's like, oh my God, everybody in the world has
Well,
to be
and also that's the
But I mean, the
latest
thing is,
result.
I've been circumcised, and like he said, like I don't consider myself to be a victim. I don't see it as a big impediment at all.
Neither does my boyfriend, but his
and-
son is uncircumcised now, and it's not really that big of a deal. So we kind of addressed that, but yeah.
Well, the thing is, there's lots of things we could do like that, and that's not the reason we have that tradition in the first place. So it's just kind of a funny thing, because in a way, to me, it's like asking if you should pierce kids' ears at 4. Kind of interesting, but it really,
Well, that one's different. That's
it's
more.
interesting enough to talk about.
Because-
It's interesting enough to talk about. Let's just put it that way. But
That's just for like aesthetic reasons or tradition. But
What?
the circumcision is more for health reasons. It's not just aesthetics.
no, come on, dude.
Only back in the day. Nowadays, we
We're gonna have to talk about it next week again, I guess, because that's where I think no. I mean, what do you mean?
You
So,
think
like,
it is mainly for aesthetics? You think it's mainly
Well,
for that reason?
No, I think that there's something to be said for like all of the kosher things were for, like rules for keeping your restaurant clean. Fine. But the compellingness of that particular health practice, it's not up to modern standards of how beneficial it is to even the chance of infection from the surgery. It's not really balanced the way we don't generally do preventative things with that minimal of benefit in other cases. So why did we have it? Actually, it's bizarre to me because we know that Judaism has it because just like kosher meats and it's arbitrary. How it became so dominant in America and stuff is still something somewhat of a mystery to me, even though I've looked into it.
Well, I don't really care how it originated. What I'm interested in is what other health benefits. The doctors seem to recommend it. I know that my
Let's
mom.
take this in mind.
Yeah, we can talk about it next week or whatever. All right.
Well, think this in mind because here's what I will do. Here's what I'll pull, and I don't know ahead of time, so I'm just like making a bet that I think this is where the argument could come. I think that if we say we should do it for the health benefits, I'll be able to find a bunch of other ludicrous things, like taking out your appendix when you're 1, that we could also do that aren't ludicrous because they can make that argument, but it becomes ludicrous.
That's a great idea, actually, because I had
That's what Gary said.
I had an appendectomy, and that sucked. That really, I almost died because of that shit.
Yeah, I'm finishing up. I will come eat.
That thing almost burst in me. I would have been dead.
Right. Well, right. I'm a good guy about thinking of fair examples. So see how many examples.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking to a guy who's in favor of eugenics, so believe me, those type of arguments probably won't get the reaction that you're expecting.
Okay, we'll see. All right, take it easy, guys.
All right, have a good one.
Thanks,
Bye.
Athena, to everybody else.
Thank you.